3, 4.
We got 4. Is it somebody I'm not seeing?
I don't see Annie Somerville, but
I don't see Annie or Nicole, but we do have 4.
yeah,
Mayor
Nicole's
Pro
here.
Tem Brown just joined,
Oh, okay.
but if you'd like, we can get started.
Mr. Dixon.
Yeah.
Okay, just
So,
a
Mr.
reminder
Casey.
to indicate where, your physical location when I do the roll. Councilmember Wilcoxen,
Oh, sure, Giuseppe Chip. Sorry. Present, City of Ypsilanti, Washington County.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Present, Ypsilanti, Michigan, Washtenaw County.
Councilmember Somerville,
Present, Ypsilanti, Michigan, Washtenaw County.
Mayor Richardson,
Present, Ypsilanti, Michigan, Washtenaw County.
Councilmember Morgan,
Present, Ypsilanti, Michigan, Washington County.
Councilmember Simmons, Mr. Jones Chance,
Present, City of Ypsilanti, County of Washtenaw.
with 6 present, there is a quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to excuse?
I move to excuse Jennifer Simmons.
Support.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we're in your hands, Mr. Halinga.
Council, moving on to the next item is agenda approval.
I'd like to move to amend the agenda by taking the boards and commissioners out of the consent agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the ayes have it. So the amended, is there a move and motion and support for the amended agenda?
I would move to approve the amended agenda with the boards and commission placed wherever is convenient on the agenda. Where would that go?
Council, I'll just move that to the first under resolutions, motions, and discussions.
Thank you. It's been moved. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, all in favor of the amended agenda?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Council, the next item on the agenda is public comments. I'm not seeing anyone on the attendees list, so we can move forward to the presentations. The first being a proclamation in honor of Michigan Ladder, which is sponsored by Mayor Richardson. Go ahead and read that now. Whereas the Ypsilanti Ladder Company began operations in 1901, celebrating almost 120 years in business, the company has ceased operations and permanently closed its stores. And whereas 3 men in 1901 used several $1,000s of their own money and help from the city of Ypsilanti to form the Michigan Ladder Company. And whereas the land at 12 East Forest Avenue became the company's permanent location. And whereas at its inception, the founders knew little about making ladders. However, they met the challenge and became a notable company throughout the world. And whereas the Michigan Ladder Company diversified its business to begin manufacturing other items, such as toys, ironing boards, boats, and ping pong tables, eventually returning to manufacturing only ladders. And whereas throughout the years, the Ypsilanti Ladder Company employed thousands of people and prided themselves for never laying off workers. And whereas Ypsilanti Ladder Company shipped millions of ladders all over the world and had many distinguished clients, including Ford Motor Company, General Motors, United States Steel, Boeing, Dollar General, Target, and the White House. And whereas through the support and cooperation from their employees, customers, and suppliers, Ypsilanti Ladder Company became the top manufacturer of ladders in the nation. Now therefore, I, Lois Allen Richardson, Mayor of the City of Ypsilanti, on behalf of the City Council, hereby this day honor the Ypsilanti Ladder Company for its great impact on the development of the city.
And we thank you. We thank you to the Harrison family and all those. Tom, we would like if you would like to have some words, you may at this time, please. Thank you.
I would like to say something, a couple things. One, this is Bob Nisley, and Bob's father purchased Michigan Ladder Company back in the 1930s. And then from the gentleman that owned it at the time, and then Bob purchased it from his father, and then I subsequently purchased it from Bob. So I thought it would be kind of fun to have Bob here to, while it's not by any means a happy occasion, but he certainly needed to be a part of this.
Yes.
So I just want to say that we have always been proud to be a part of the Ypsilanti community. It was, the community was an important part of our history and our company. And we prided ourselves not only on the products that we made wood ladders, of course, but we began making fiberglass and aluminum ladders as well as the other products you'd mentioned. And I was always quite proud of, quite frankly, of the employees that we had. The only reason we were able to do the things that we did is because of the people that we hired. And if anybody knows our story or knows the history of some of the people that we've hired, it was a very eclectic, very interesting group, but I will tell you, they were all wonderful people, every single one of them. Good, hardworking people that showed up to work every single day. And I would just tell you briefly, I mean, we hosted 2 work enclaves. One was a group of developmentally disadvantaged individuals. Another was a group with closed head injuries. We were a company that was we regarded as felony friendly because we had hired people who had spent time in prison. And the idea was to reintegrate people into the workforce, veterans and others as well. And I'd always felt that was just a big part of our story, certainly the community that we were in, as well as our employees. So really, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of all of us, I just want to thank you for taking the time tonight to recognize our company, because it certainly was a great story. There's no question about it.
Well, we certainly have appreciated you being there, and it's going to be a little bit different to drive down Forest Street and not see the ladder company there. But we know that sometimes it's time to move on, and we just wish you well in whatever you're going to be doing going forward.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Yes, and thank you for bringing Mr. Nessel and your mom along with you. Yes.
And I think my mom wanted to make a comment.
Oh, sure, by all means.
We have a long history, the DeMoose family. A part of Tom is my son. And my father was the first city manager in Ypsilanti, and it was hired in 1947.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you instituted the city manager form of government, and he was your first city manager. And of course, I've been here ever since. And so I just thought there's a long history here, sitting at this table.
Well, good. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I know that you've been very active in the city of Ypsilanti over the years, and very, very, very much appreciated the work that you've done, and appreciate you, all of you. And thank you so much. And blessings untold as you go forth and whatever you want to, whichever way you go, and not only blessings, but health to you, Marcia. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Did the other gentleman want to say something? Mr. Nessel.
Did you want to say anything?
Well, my father joined Michigan Ladder Company in the early 30s and was there until 67 when he retired. I joined him when I graduated from Michigan in 61 and worked my whole career at Michigan Ladder Company till 2014.
Okay.
Well, I paid my dues.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. You know, it's always when things like this when it's time to make a change like this, it's always bittersweet. But thank you and all the best as you go forward and whatever each of you decide to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did any council people, would anybody like to say, have a word?
I just had a short response.
Yes.
I just want to say, when people go into business, who intends to become a staple in the community, and when you have so much history and so much legacy in one place, it becomes a standard. And then when you produce a product that has high quality, you get a reputation. And the last thing I was going to say, the philosophy of helping disadvantaged people as you're making a dollar in this community, it goes a long way. So I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate your community service and working alongside Ypsilantians for umpteen decades. So we hope that whoever, again, it's a big space to fill, but we appreciate you having your business here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Any other council, staff? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too. Good night. All right, Mr. Halenga.
Council, the next item on the agenda is a presentation by the EMU Public and Nonprofiting Budget Class. And those presenting are Kyler Chandler, Faye Alicia Mary, and Carolyn Anderton.
Okay. I've been looking forward to this. You all are welcome. And who's gonna start us off with the presentation?
Well, to the presenters, would you like me to share my screen, or was one of you planning on doing it?
I can share my screen if that makes it easier, if you don't mind.
No problem. All right, you should be allowed to share your screen now.
Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to take a brief opportunity to introduce ourselves, just so you know who's talking to you. My name is Kyler Chandler.
My name is Faye Shamiri.
And I'm Carolyn Anderton.
And us, together with 16 other graduate students, created a financial condition analysis for the city of Ypsilanti. The report has 4 sections: operations, public investment, taxes, and legacy costs. The report is supposed to outline the strengths and weaknesses of the city from a financial perspective and potentially guide your decision-making process moving forward. As an informal note before we get into it, I just wanted to say that we were made aware that our political science department has no direct affiliation with the city. So we both wanted to thank you for your time, as well as you giving us the opportunity to build that bridge moving forward. But just jumping into the report, the first section, my section that I led, was operations. And this is to broadly indicate the financial situation of the city. And one of the indicators that we looked at was revenues and expenditures. And what we saw here was that revenues greatly outpaced expenditures over the past decade. From fiscal year 2011 to 2020, revenues grew 18.1%, while expenditures only grew 8.6%. And in the time period most associated with post-refinancing of the Water Street project debt, fiscal year 2017 to 2020, revenues grew 4.9%, while expenditures stayed flat. Another indicator we looked at was cash on hand. And what we saw here was consistent growth, especially in the later part of the decade. And what we attributed this to in our report was the city turning chronic deficits from fiscal year 2011 to 2014 to surpluses in 2017 to 2020. Another thing we looked at was full-time employee count. We saw consistency from fiscal year 2011 to 2017 and growth, considerable growth, from fiscal year 2017 to 2020. The final thing we looked at in operations was the total fund balance, or the amount of reserves that the city is able to put back year after year. And the lowest point for the total fund balance from fiscal year 2011 to 2020 is fiscal year 2016. But another way to look at total fund balance is to compare it to the city's expenditures. At the lowest point in fiscal year 2017, the total fund balance to expenditure ratio was only 48.1%. The magic number when looking at this indicator is 25%. Anything above that is amazing. So at no point between fiscal year 2011 and 2020 did the city get anywhere close to going low as this number. So overall, for operations, our most notable variances came from the Water Street project. Specifically, anyone looking at indicators from fiscal year 2014 to 2017 could be quite concerned from the outside looking in. However, this seems to just be a natural consequence of the city's refinancing process. Moreover, consistent full-time employment, healthy growth of revenues and expenditures, healthy and ample cash on hand, as well as a better than average total fund balance to expenditure ratio seems to support the notion that the city is doing well.
Thank you.
Over the past 10 years, the city of Ypsilanti has focused its spending on areas in the community that needed improvement and that benefit the city's population. We've analyzed the city's master plan, park plans, and spending. The public investment spending was pretty stable from 2011 to 2020. There was a large public investment in 2014 and in 2016. In 2014, you can see that the citywide spending on public works was at an all-time high, and that was due to the street lighting project. In 2016, there was also a significant amount of spending as well, and that was related to the Water Street project. Overall, when looking at the neighboring townships with the city of Ypsilanti, Ypsilanti is the third lowest investor in public works and the lowest investor in culture, parks, and recreation.
The Legacy Cost Group looked at the city's ability to pay debts as they become due. We primarily use two metrics to do this. The debt to revenue ratio, which looks at the total balance of debts owed relative to the total revenue of the city, and the debt service to revenue ratio, which looks at the payment schedule relative to the total revenue. For both of these metrics, we found decreases. Looking specifically at debt to revenue ratio, we found that in fiscal year 2011, the number was 276.6%, and by fiscal year 2020, that had been lowered to 110.5%. Levels below 200% are good. This means that over the course of the decade, the city was able to bring their debt down to a level that is no longer concerning. This group also considered pension contributions, specifically looking at the Police and Firemen's Retirement System, or PFRS. Employer contributions doubled from $1 million to $2 million over the course of the decade, and the funded ratio decreased from 74% to 48%. The Protecting Local Government Retirement and Benefits Act recommends a ratio over 60%. So having a funded ratio of 48% is concerning to the city. While debt service has decreased, which is a good thing, pension contributions are eating up the cost savings. The tax group looked at taxes and found that they were the main source of revenue for the city of Ypsilanti. They make up more than 60% of the general fund revenue. Ypsilanti increased tax revenue by 10.9% in fiscal year 2020. This was due to a higher millage rate, which provided the city with almost $1 million in extra revenue. Looking specifically at the millage rate slide, the millage rate was the highest in Washtenaw County and one of the highest in Southeast Michigan. This number was 10.2 mils in 2011, and it increased to 70.2 mils in 2020. Ypsilanti has a high millage rate and a smaller population, which means that the millage rate can allow the city to provide more services, but it may drive some people out of the city in search of cost savings. Thank you for your time and for fostering this relationship with Eastern Michigan University Political Science.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for our presenters from any council members or staff? Mr. Wilcoxon.
I just want to, it seems like from this whole, but thank you for the presentation. That was great. This is a nice augmentation to the information we're going to get later on from other folks. But it's interesting that it seems like the biggest drawdown at this point is the contributions to retirement. Everything else was positive, and that is something that gets negotiated with the different departments. But that's interesting that's the biggest drawdown for us. So.
I thought so too. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Morgan, is your hand up or are you adjusting your computer?
Yeah, I was just writing, but I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It was really concise, clear, and really good news for us. Thank you.
I was just going to jump in. I'm sorry, my camera's not on. I'm trying to finish my dinner right now, but thank you all so much. I appreciate you all taking the time to come and present to us your findings and taking the time to even just look further and deeper into, the status and the health of the city. So thank you all very much.
Yes.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having us.
Sure.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else? I want to thank you also, and thanks to your instructor. I'm not sure if he's a full professor or not, but I'm gonna call him professor. Thanks so much for him reaching out to us, and even for him having the foresight to have you do this assignment. We appreciate it, and we wish you all the best. And I think when I was looking today at what I was sent, you're all due to graduate next year. Finish that'll be your master's?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Congratulations and thank you so much. And I know classes are over and all, but thank you for sticking around to come and make the presentation. Wish you all the best as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Council, next item on the agenda is the 5-year financial projection by John Kazor. Go ahead and share my screen.
Hello, Mr. Kazor. It's been a while since
It's been a while.
we've seen you, but good to
evening.
see you.
Congratulations on your new role. And
Thank
to all the
you.
council for your support to keep things moving. As the students from Eastern pointed out, things are looking better. So I will recap, as I've done for a number of years, where things look like they're going. And I think the city has been very responsive to see these forecasts and make adjustments so that you're always looking further down the road than just next fiscal year. I think your 2-year budget helps with that as well. So I want to just start with the tax base. The chart here shows that the state equalized value, the SEV, you are almost back to where you were at the peak prior to the Great Recession. You're still about 2% less than where you were. However, your taxable value is still 14% less than where you were in 2007. So this is what we're seeing all over the state. SEV values are going up, but because of Proposal A, your taxable value is just chugging along at the 1.7, 1.8% average per year. So you're falling, the gap is increasing, you're falling behind the SEV, which does act as a shock absorber should we have another economic downturn. However, you can see the delay in coming back is pretty substantial. On top of that, we have the Headley Amendment, and the city since 2015 has lost 3.5% of its taxing capacity. And since that time, that's totaled $1.3 million. So over the past 6 years, if not for Headley, the city would have $1.3 million more than it has. So it's very unfortunate that the compounding of Proposal A and Headley sees you falling or growing very slowly, falling behind where you should be, could be, in a perfect situation. So this kind of gives you the sense of where things are going. I'm hearing more communities talk about a Headley override. I'm not sure that's in the future for Ypsilanti, but that is one consideration that more communities are looking at as that taxing capacity gets whittled away as values go up and the Headley formula kicks in and reduces that. So we can go to the next slide, Andrew. So as I usually do, I'll present the forecast. This is going out through 2027. And we're looking at the different assumptions here. There are others that are smaller, less impactful, but these are the primary ones. On the revenue side, property taxes are assumed to increase about 1% a year in fiscal year 23 and 24, and then 2% for the next 2 years, and then 2.5%. So we are assuming some growth in your tax base, and that is due primarily to coming out of the COVID recession, as well as the uptick that we're seeing in the market, more people buying homes. And then as that gap between SEV and taxable value increases, every time a property transfers owner, the city's able to recover a larger portion of that money that was lost by the Proposal A limits. So we're anticipating a slow growth going forward. Revenue sharing on the constitutional side for 2023, still not sure where we're going to be with all of the impacts from COVID. Right now, the economy is chugging along and doing quite well. We don't know how that's going to move down the road. But 1% after that per year, just trying to be conservative and not overstate things. Most other operating revenues are about 1% as well, just trying to keep it modest and not overestimate where we're going to be. On the expenditure side, salaries and wages increasing at 2% a year, and this would include step increases, annual adjustments to wages, vacancies, new employees coming in at a lower rate. So it's kind of a combination of different increases and people starting out at different levels. So we're assuming 2% per year growth on the salaries and wages line items. Healthcare is assumed to go up at 5% a year. And this is something that has moderated quite a bit in the past few years. Since the city's following the hard cap for the PA 152 on most of your plans or all of them, you're likely to see something a little less than that. Historically, the medical component of the consumer price index has gone up at 3.5% to 4% a year. So this might again be a little bit conservative. Dental and optical, not substantial costs, but again, assuming some increase there. General inflation is applied to things like your phone bill and a lot of your insurances, your office supplies, that sort of thing, just assuming there's going to be an inflationary growth. There is concern and growing talk about a potential inflationary period coming up. I'm not going to be the one trying to predict when and whether and how much that would be. But that is something to just be aware of. If inflation increases substantially, we know that Proposal A will allow the city to increase your taxable value up to 5%. So that is something to pay attention. They would offset each other a little bit. Workers' comp is essentially tied to the wage line item, so that's 2% as well. And then looking at some of the investments, like the students talked about, capital improvements, and this is general fund expenditure. The 2022 budget is already adopted, so we're starting with the 2023. You've got about $850,000 budgeted, anticipated in your capital plan for that year. And then after that, it just kind of goes down and levels off a little bit. Police and fire, we're assuming that they're spending about what they spend on average, $165,000 a year for police motor pool, $220,000 a year for fire. And as you know, should grant funding become available for some of the larger pieces in the fire department, that can save money down the road. But we are anticipating transferring that much from general fund into the motor pool over this time period. And then other general fund, and this would include the assessing, the building, and other departments, about $150,000, $160,000 a year going forward. And yeah, thank you. So we heard the EMU students talking about fund balance. And yes, the fund balance is relatively high. However, the bulk of that is committed and not available to the city to spend on anything. Almost $1 million of your fund balance is held there and committed for employee benefits that have accumulated and would be paid out during their employment or when they separate from the city. You have about $500,000 in the energy efficiency and conservation project that's committed. The big one is the rail platform commitment, the $2 million there that is not yet in the capital plan in the next 5 years. It's pushed out beyond that at this point. But with the federal potential for federal stimulus money and a focus on transportation, that might get moved into the next few years should federal dollars become available for that. And then finally, the Peninsular Dam removal, $500,000 is committed for that. So that all adds up to about 3.9 million of your about $8 million budget or fund balance right now. We've also got 10% of your annual expenditures as the minimum reserve that is uncommitted and usable for other purposes. So this is something that we're trying to track, and it notes there 10% is relatively low should something severe happen. But I think overall the city's been managing its finances pretty well, as we saw in the last presentation. Go ahead, Andrew. So the outlook for the general fund, and this picture seems to repeat itself a lot year to year. And again, what we see is taking a look forward and saying, okay, maybe we need to adjust a few things. I will say that, as I noted, some of the assumptions are probably a little more conservative than they could be, but I don't like to put a forecast together that's overly optimistic and leads people astray to hiring more staff or incurring more costs that make it really difficult to get out of in the future. Right now, we're looking at about a $670,000 a year deficit each year going forward, and that can be closed by a lot of means. And as I noted, a big portion of that fund balance is committed. So that yellow shaded area there is your committed fund balance. The blue is your 10% unassigned fund balance. So that's what you could use. And as we see here going forward, as you have those deficits year after year, we start to dip down into the danger zone of getting below where we want to be with fund balance. You'll see in fiscal 2023 that drop in fund balance. That's the anticipated use of the $500,000 in the Peninsular Dam reserve. So that's there and accounted for. If that gets moved one way or the other, the fund balance would adjust accordingly. We still have uncertainty with COVID. And with that comes the uncertainty of now the American Rescue Plan Act and the funds that are going to be available. There's a lot of people trying to understand what that money could be used for. And it seems there should be guidelines coming out this week or next from Treasury to help us understand what those limitations and available uses are for that money that would be coming from that fund, from that legislation. So that could impact this. It can be used for revenues that fell short. So any revenues that came under 2019 levels, you could use the money to backfill. And we know we can use it for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Not sure what that means yet. And then supporting other agencies, partnering with other municipalities to create regional opportunities to address the economic impacts of COVID. And again, we're still not sure what all that means, waiting for more direction. So the outlook is still concerning going forward, but I've seen the city in the past 5 years or so really work to resolve some of these imbalances that are forecast and make tough choices, and in some cases get lucky with revenues to avoid some of the drops in fund balance and the deficits that we've seen in the past. So we go to the next one. Streets funds. This is a little different than what we forecasted last year because your capital plan has changed. So now we're looking at some significant investments over the next 5 years, but a lot of that is really just match for other federal and state funds and grants to make improvements, some bridges and streets primarily. So looking at expending that money. And even with those funds, the major streets fund looks relatively healthy, and that's assuming no real growth in Act 51. The local streets fund includes no capital plan through 2027, no major expenditures for capital. And as we all know, at some point you have to start investing in the roads or they start to deteriorate. So we have to pay attention to that on the local street side to make sure that those roads don't fall to a level that requires substantial reinvestment, and yet you're always resurfacing at a lower cost. There is money in there for traffic calming, and there's an assumption that 10% of major street Act 51 money goes into the local streets fund. So that's why you see the fund balance on local streets kind of just going up, and major streets is kind of stable. Go to the next slide, Andrew. So then the other funds that we've looked at in this model, we're trying to understand things like the parking fund. That's the one in the upper right there. Didn't really get a good start to that fund since there's not been a lot of economic activity over the last year. It's really hard to know what parking revenues might be like after things resume. But essentially the goal is to maintain a self-sustaining fund that would support the parking efforts of the city through parking fees, parking tickets, revenue from those sources primarily, and then maintaining the parking infrastructure for the city. The garbage fund, pretty stable, but it's assuming $185,000 to $230,000 a year in general fund subsidy. If there was a way to continue to reduce those costs in the garbage fund, or as your millage creeps up a little bit, that subsidy to the garbage fund from general fund may go down. On the flip side, if you renegotiate your garbage contract in the next 5 years and costs go up, there might be a greater subsidy from general. And then motor pool, again, forecasted to maintain a fairly stable balance. And this is after a lot of years of reserving substantial amounts and then spending it down, and now getting to a point of maintenance and stability where there's a predictable replacement cycle and funding suitable to sustain that. So that's the other funds that are in here. And I believe that's the last slide. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer and entertain those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kazar. Council, any questions, comments? Mr. Wilcoxon.
course, right? Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kazor, I had a couple questions about these. So in the CIP, there was a $850,000 expenditure for this year, and then it continually drops. And I know that that was on the assumption slide, and so the assumption that that is going to continuously drop is based on what?
That's based on the city's capital improvement plan that was adopted.
So the capital improvement investments that we're seeing in 2021 are a result of not having that plan in place, and we're playing catch up, and then the drop is because we've got a better plan in place.
I'm not sure what the 2021 is. That 850,000 was in fiscal 2023.
Oh, okay, right. Sorry. So going forward, that's what we've projected for that to be. All right.
Right, and that's things like carpet replacement and carports, and I don't remember everything that's in there. There has been substantial investment in the city's properties over the past 5 years or so, and I know that a lot of the energy improvements, other improvements at City Hall, the police department, and fire are getting some improvements as well. So that's just trying to maintain an investment in those facilities to keep them stable.
In the street funds slide, I noticed that there were large revenue spikes for 2015 and 2021. And I was just curious as to what explained that large spike in 2015 and then this year.
Andrew, could you go back to the streets fund slide, please? Okay, thank you.
Right, and I'm trying to remember, I believe those were both grant funds, and
okay,
Reagan, if you can confirm that, I think that's where the city got some grant funding for some major projects.
Yes, I believe those are grant funds. We could also provide some details later on if City Council would like some additional information about that.
That's fine. I kind of thought that there was a bolus of money that came in that came from that. So I don't know how that got adjusted across the years. So that would make sense.
And council member, what I would say is that in the future years, the 2023 to 2027, we're showing the city's contribution for these projects. But if you were to look at the actual expenditures, when you tie in the grant funding, we're going to see some spikes in those later years too, assuming you're getting the grant funding for a couple of the bridge projects and street projects that are anticipated in the CIP. We're going to show a big spike when it's actually received as revenue. But right now, this is just showing the city's resources.
Great, thank you. The only other thing I commented was on, every year when we come up with this, we're short on garbage funds, and the fact that we keep having to subsidize that through, a couple $100,000 through the general fund is, I'm just wondering if there's a more creative way that we can address that. But if that's tied to millage and our hands are tied on that, then there's not a whole lot we can do, I guess.
Right, it is millage. The city used to get more money from recycling. Recycling market has crashed, so there's very little revenue there. And then just the costs of collection drive that imbalance. It's not as bad as it was in some years in the past, but it's still a drag on the general fund.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members? Anyone else? Welcome, Council Member Simmons. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Kazar? Okay.
A quiet audience this evening.
It sure is.
I will just say that, like the students pointed out, the city has, you saw those years of negative use of fund balance and whatnot. There were a lot of difficult choices that were made, and some wise choices to make some investments. Street lighting, yes, there was a big expenditure, but it's reduced your operating costs. It's the same thing with getting the Water Street millage passed. That was a significant benefit to the general fund. So I think the city is working really hard to address some of these ongoing issues. And as they pointed out, legacy costs are the next big hurdle.
Mr. Wilcoxon.
I guess I did have one other question. You know, you were talking about the Headley Amendment, and you talked about an override for the city of Ypsilanti. I wasn't aware that that was a city-specific override.
Right. So the city can petition the voters, in other words, put it on the ballot to override the Headley rollback. So you can say we have a charter maximum of 20 mills and we're currently at 18 mills. I don't know the numbers. I'm not looking at them, but and we're going to request the taxpayers approve us to go back to 20 or request that we go to 19. You can ask that on a ballot, but it is considered a tax increase, so it has to be approved by voters.
And is there a movement to address the Headley Amendment at the state level?
I have not heard anything about that.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Those were my questions, Mr. Wilcoxon. Yes. And, you know, I really believe that Headley is something that needs to be addressed at the state level. And I do know in meeting and talking with the others at municipalities at the MML that any number of municipalities feel the same way, that unfortunately somehow or other, I don't know, I wasn't here when they did that, the Headley and they really conflict and have caused a lot of headaches for a lot of municipalities. So that's the talk that I hear when I'm speaking with other municipalities. So it really does need to be looked at and something done with it. I'm not sure exactly what should be done with it or how to do it, but it needs to be changed. So
it would take a constitutional convention to change it.
Mr. Morgan.
I just wanted to ask about that 10% in the reserve fund. Is that the number we're at, or are we a little below that or a little above it?
You are currently above that. So your fund balance right now is about 8.4 million, and your target, including the committed and the unassigned, is just under 6 million. So your fund balance is actually substantially higher than where you need to be, but it's a comfortable position. It allows you to hit these years where things don't go quite the way you want them to.
Is there a percentage in that? Like, since we use 10%, are we like, is there a number? Like, we 14% is of the 8 million, like.
You're asking what the current percentage is?
Yes,
of fund
that's what I'm
balance? I
asking.
believe it's about 40% right now, maybe a little higher.
Oh, wow.
It's actually more than that.
Okay.
But again,
Cool.
almost 4 million of that is committed. You can't spend it on anything else.
I understand.
So the real challenge is at least keeping it close to that 10%. I usually advise, and the students alluded to it, 25% is more preferred, but the city's dealing with a lot, and trying to manage it all is tricky. So 10% seems to be the number that's comfortable.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member, Somerville and Mayor Pro Tem? You're not where on my screen where I can see you, so I'm not sure. Do either of you have any questions or comments? Okay, seeing and hearing none. City Manager, did you have any comments for Mr. Kazar or Reagan?
No, I just want to thank Mr. Kazar for his work once again. It's a pleasure working with him. And also our Fiscal Services Director, Reagan. So I have nothing, no questions for you guys.
Okay. I want to thank Mr. Kazar, and again, also thank Reagan for keeping us where we should be, or keeping us out of real trouble, both of you. And Mr. Kazar has been over the years, and Reagan, you've been here a number of years now too. So really appreciate the work that you do, and thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with the city.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy working with you. Thank you.
And
Stay
Mr.
safe and
Baker,
stay well.
thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming back. You're an award-winning numbers guy. Thank you for coming back to help us preserve our city.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Again, stay safe and stay well. 19 has not left town yet. So, but anyway, okay, thank you. Mr. Halinga, we'll move on.
Council, the next item on the agenda is the proposed budget for amended budget presentation by City Manager Francis McMullen and Finance Director Reagan Basabika. I'll go ahead and share my screen for that presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Halinga. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, first of all, I'd like to thank staff. I want to thank staff for the hard work they put into the budget process. They are so cooperative and supportive. I just wanted to give them a shout out tonight for all that they do every day, but particularly during budget season. It's always a push to get everything in, and they have been fantastic. So tonight we're going to present to you the amended budget of 2021 and 21-22. Next screen. And this is just an outline of what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the dates, the things that we did, and our goals. And then I'll probably turn it over to Reagan to continue. Next slide. As you know, the budget process started way before now with staff, but formally to council, we presented our proposed budget and capital improvement on April 30th. And then we will have our public hearing and proposed budget and capital improvement plans coming up this month. As you know, according to the charter, we need to approve our budget and adopt the capital improvements plan by the first meeting in June, and then it will take effect July 1, 2021. Here are your goals. I believe you probably remember what you said was important to the community at this time. So we adopted 5 goals: communications and connections, community safety, infrastructure, which was broken down to like 5 parts: commons, housing, safety, sustainability, and building, council staff workflow, and council staff development. And we use the goals, as you know, as a planning tool for our budget. So our budget was based on the goals adopted by council. You'll see things in the budget, such as additional staff being added, because you wanted to have more of a mental health response. You'll see staff added so that we can have an adequate comprehensive communication plan. And then you'll see some additional funding in our Department of Public Services for infrastructure. And that is, that's a lot. You're gonna see some funds for our sidewalks, housing. We're still trying to make current housing more affordable to address housing insecurity, address safety. And in our budget, we talked about addressing safety for traffic calming, but safety has risen to address the city's gun violence and things of that nature. So we're including that as well. Sustainability, looking for ways to increase our recycling. As you saw with John Kazor, our garbage fund continues to need a general fund allocation because of the decrease in recycling. So we are continuing with our, I would say, with our collaboration with warmer to get some consolidated and some collaboration around recycling. Building, we want to develop some long-term vacant sites in the city, and our major one is Water Street. So Water Street is a major focus for this coming fiscal year. It continues to be, and so we'll provide you with updates as they become available. Council staff workflow, we're doing a compensation study, and you will see that in the HR budget. We're going to ask for some outside help with that so that we can have a structured scale that helps us when we implement raises. Currently, there is no pay structure for non-union employees, and we thought that that was important, so we have allocated funds toward that. We're going to continue to explore regional transit and available grant funding. As you know, the $2 million that was committed for the rail, we did not take it out yet. That will take a council resolution to take it out. But in the meantime, we're still going to explore regional transit with our neighboring communities, because that is something that is needed for sustainability. Complete the master plan, sustainability plan. And then last is development. And so we want to make sure that our staff is developed as well as council. We want to give them the tools they need. 1 second, it says that my PC needs to restart. So give me a second. I told him no. Okay. All right, sorry for that interruption. But so we're working with, HR is working with EMU to develop a plan that will allow students also to develop in public service, as well as provide some additional assistance to our council members, to our mayor and council members. And the other thing is we want to create a framework for diversity and inclusion through more effective recruiting, staffing, and promotions. As you know, we did complete a virtual training through Treliant this past fiscal year. And that simply was not enough. That was just the beginning. We're going to continue to work toward making the city of Ypsilanti an organization that esteems diversity and inclusion. We want our workforce to mirror our community. I think we're doing pretty good at this point, but we want to continue to promote it. Next slide. Okay, Reagan, do you want to take over here?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, our city manager. Good evening, everybody. Also, I would like to thank our Eastern, good evening, Mayor. So I would just like to thank our graduate students from Eastern Michigan for giving us a refresher of our financial history. I do believe that we made some good decisions in the past that really place us in a better position today. Also, thank you to John for giving us his long-term projections, because this really helps us in planning the future of the city accordingly. So moving on to our, so what I'm going to be sharing today is the contents of our proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22. So regarding our millage rates this year went up by 3.48%. In 2020, that was 345 million, and now it's up to 357 million. And the rate of inflation this year for 2021 is at 1.4%. So again, per headley amendment, whenever your growth is higher than the rate of inflation, then you are subject to a millage rollback or a millage reduction. And for us this year, that will be 0.9797. So if you're going to look at our 2020 millage compared to our 2021 millage, you will see some decrease in there. So like for our general operating, it's from 18.0298 it will now be down to 17.6637 for 2021. Our sanitation millage from 2.6362 down to 2.5826, and our public transit from 0.9277 down to 0.9088. So our police and fire pension and OPEB millage and water street debt these are not subject to a millage reduction because these are based on need. But as you could see here on the police and fire pension, there is a significant decrease of 2.5789. And this is due to the new annual required contribution set by our actuaries. We used to contribute around 1.8 million for the employer contribution, but on their new assumption, it's now down to 1.2 million because of some of their assumption changes, like for our census and also regarding the healthcare tax. So overall, our millage rate will now decrease by 3.0735. So our millage rate was 35.4130. It will be down to 32.3395. Next slide, please. Okay. So before we move on to the next, to our budget, the proposed budget, we just wanted to show you in this table what happened in our 2019-2020 general fund actual versus our budget. So in that fiscal year, we were projecting a shortfall of 89,202, but we ended up having a surplus of 991,465. And these were due to some savings that we had in our salaries and benefits. This is due to some vacant positions, and also we implemented some vacancy controls. So that saved us around 575,000. And also for our operating expenses, we saved around 409,000 because of due to the COVID's uncertainty, the different departments found ways on how to reduce their operating expenses, which now that now put our fund balance to 8,250,425. So that's our beginning fund balance for 2020. Next slide, please. So the proposed budget, the proposed budget that we're having the council approve is a balanced budget. And what we wanted to show here that to council is there are three possible scenarios when we say it's a balanced budget. So scenario one is when revenue and expenditures are equal to each other, and we don't have to use fund balance, then that is a balanced budget. Scenario two is if our revenue is higher, our expenditure is lower, and again, we don't have to use fund balance, that is still a balanced budget. And scenario three is if our revenue is lower, expenditure is higher, and we have to use fund balance, we still consider that as a balanced budget. So Uniform Budgeting Accounting Act 2 of 1968 prohibit deficit spending by a local government unit. So what that means is if your revenue is lower, your expenditure is higher, and you don't have enough fund balance to cover the excess, then that is now considered deficit spending, and it's not allowed under Michigan law. Okay, so on this table, what we're showing is the projected fund balance end. You will see here the different funds. And then on column 3, it shows you the beginning fund balance of the fund. Columns 4 to 7 would show you the proposed budget. And column 8 will show you the projected fund balance end. So if you focus here on column 8, you would see here that the fund balances are either 0 or have a positive fund balance. So what that means is that there are no deficit spending in this proposed budget. So I'm not going to discuss all of this, but I just highlighted some of our major funds. So looking at our general fund, it starts off with 8.3 million. And after the proposed budget, it will now be down to 7.8 million. For our major street, it starts off with 2.5 million. And at the end of the proposed budget, it will be down to 2.2 million. Our capital improvement fund starts off with 750,000 and will be down to 200,000. And for our motor pool, starts off with 1,089,000, and it will increase after the proposed budget to 1.1 million. Okay. So general fund original budget versus the amended budget. On the last fiscal year, City Council has already approved our original budgets for fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22. And we just wanted to show in this table the different amendments that we're going to have in this proposed budget. So in our original budget 2021, we were projecting a shortfall of 284,000. But for fiscal year, the amended budget for 2021, we are now just projecting a shortfall of 35,000, or a decrease in the shortfall by 248,000. For the original budget in 21-22, we were projecting 35,000 shortfall, but that will now increase in amended budget for 21-22 by 449,000, or a total increase of 413,000. And I will show you the details in the next slides. Okay. So as I said in the previous slides, for fiscal year 2021, there was a reduction of the shortfall by 250,000, and here are some of the reasons for that. So there's an increase on the state shared revenue based on state projections, 338,000. So on our original budget, we thought due to COVID, we're not able to receive all of the state funding, but looks like per their projection as of now, we're going to receive that full amount. Also, there's an increase in the fire protection grant, PA 289, 433,000. On the original budget, we just projected 50% funding, but again, we did receive 100% funding, and we've already received this in December. Also, there's an increase in our state marijuana revenue sharing, 140,000. So this is the first time we are receiving this revenue sharing from the state for the marijuana revenue. Also, there's an increase in the marijuana license applications, 85,000. We also had some decreases in revenues. There's a decrease in our interest earnings because of the lower interest rates. So that's 102,000 decrease in our revenue. We are also decreasing our budget by 76,000 for the SRO contract cancellation. And also there's a decrease in the building department collection for 198,000. For fiscal year amended 21, oops, can we go back there? Sorry. So for fiscal year 21-22, again, we are projecting an increase in the state marijuana revenue sharing, 140,000. We are projecting that we'll be receiving this on a yearly basis. And then decrease in interest earnings for 21-22, same reason. And also 76,000 for the SRO contract cancellation. Okay. For our general fund expenditure amendments, for the building department, there's a decrease in their contractual service due to COVID. They were not able to do some of the work. So there's a decrease in their contractual service. There's also an increase in our COVID-related expenses, 76,000. And then increase in errors and omissions, 43,000. Increase in the public utility streetlight, 15,000. And there's also an increase to transfer out to parking fund since there was a limitation on the operations of parking. The general fund has to subsidize the parking fund with this amount. For fiscal year 21-22, we're projecting a decrease in the healthcare premiums, 107,000. Decrease in OPEB contribution, 143,000. And these are the increases for our expenditures. So there's increase in the building secretary from part-time to full-time, 45,000. Increase in the new communication director, 81,000. Increase in the social worker, 103,000. Equipment operators, 59,000. Contractual service for Peninsular and others, 78,000. Increase in errors and emissions, 10,000. Janitorial service, 10. Medical service, 6,000. Motor pool charges, 15. Office supplies, 10. Public utility streetlight, 36. Repairs and maintenance supply, 8. And another transfer out to parking fund, but it's going to be lower, 12,000. And increase in our telephone and internet, 12,000. Okay, so these are the items that we did not include in the general fund for fiscal year 21-22. Our PA 289 fire protection funding. So again, for fiscal year 21-22, we're just projecting a 50% funding because this is approved by the state on a yearly basis. So if we receive this money, 430,000, we are close to balancing our budget for 21-22 without the use of our fund balance. Also, we have not included in the budget the American Rescue Plan grant of 1.9 million, since it's still unclear on where we could use this fund. And also, the fire chief has requested 3 additional police officers, but we have not included that in the budget, and that could cost us around 238,000.
Reagan, we did not include the expenditure, I don't think, for the youth grants, right? Because council has to approve that annually.
We did already include that in the budget.
Okay, where is that? I was
It's
thinking we had to do it on an annual basis. I'm glad to know that.
okay. Yep. Okay. So this pie chart shows how the sources of our revenue. So for our taxes and special assessment, that's 64%. And then 20% comes from intergovernmental state revenue share. 6% comes from licenses and permits. 4% comes from charges for services. And 2% comes from transfer in. So this transfer in is from the public safety fund. And also we have 4% in other revenue. Okay, so this chart again shows us where we spend our money, and we do spend them in public safety, 65%, 22% for general government, 4% in public works, 3% parks and recreation, and 6% transfer out to support the other funds. Okay, so this wraps up our general fund. If the city council has some questions before we move on to other funds, we'll be happy to answer.
Are there any questions?
Of course.
Or comments from council? Mr. Wilcoxon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager and Financial Director Besapika. I was a little confused in some of these things in terms of, I'm sorry, my numbering for the slides is based on the previous iteration of the agenda, so I'm off a little bit here. But there was a slide that had 30,000 for a social worker, that there was nothing amended, and I'm wondering how that relates to 103,000 that was shown in an earlier slide for the police fund.
So later on, we will see the changes in the public safety fund. Originally, the social worker was budgeted in that fund in 205, but then since 30,000 cannot cover for the social worker, it will now be shouldered 100% by the general fund. So there will be 30,000 freed up in the public safety fund, but then it will be shouldered 100% in the general fund. That's why we see that increase of 103.
Thank you.
Also, it's, I do also believe, if I'm correct, Mr. Basabika, that the position is now a full-time position.
Yes, so that the proposal now is a full-time position. That is correct.
There was reference in one of the slides to an SRO contract. Can you refresh my memory about what the SRO contract is?
So that's the school resource officer. This is a contract with the police department, and I believe due to some closures there or some other reason, they terminated the contract.
Oh, okay. There was a significant decrease in the building department collections. I think it was like $170,000. Can you tell me what that was about?
I believe that is for the certificate of compliance. That's a huge charge that we're not able to collect. I think Mr. Myers could probably explain that further if he's here. Building director.
Mr. Myers, can you help us with that, please?
Yeah, so during COVID, we knew that the average residents in the city would not want an inspector going through multiple apartments at a time. And so for a bit, we stopped inspecting, and we deployed our inspectors elsewhere. And then we also, then we kind of got back in, and then we had to stop again, depending on the pause, because they do go through everyone's home, and people weren't feeling comfortable. And so that was the reason for that pause. We weren't able to actually inspect rentals outside of life and safety things, which there is no cost for.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one question, Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Basic, and thank you so much for all of the work you've done to keep us financial upstanding. Again, with the 200 on the fund 205 for public safety, where it shows the starting balance, and then it shows the 350 or 370,000 for the public safety. Is there like when it has, I'm looking at the when there's like 35,880 for the balance, and then we put 375,000 in, like, what is that money being allocated to for public safety? Like, is that in alignment? I don't want to be redundant, Councilman, Mr. Councilman Wilcoxon's question, but is that money in alignment with the police department? How does it, then you see the ending balance of like 90,000, like it just goes through? What is it being, does it just pass through? Like, how can it not grow? Like, what is it being used for?
It will be shown in the next slide. I think we could move on to the next slide, Andrew. If we could show 205. Oh, it's it will lay out there. But we usually spend that on the park capital, 125, and then we also use 220,000 of that to support the general fund.
So
and then
public,
for some,
okay, so public safety has a broad definition of what that means and what it looks like.
It's the public safety fund. It's just the source. I believe this is collected by the county. They set a public safety millage, and they've laid out where we could use it. And so the council before decided that we could use it as part of park capital, and then also to support the general fund. But essentially, since 65% of our expenditures comes from spent for public safety, it's like the $220,000 is also being allocated to pay for some
now
of
is
those.
public safety and community safety synonymous?
That's a good question.
So when we're dealing with community safety projects or whatever, or can we go to that public safety fund and use those funds?
Council, if I could interject. So the public safety millage was approved by the voters. And it was any municipality within the county that has its own police department was allocated certain funds. And there was no specific requirement in how those funds were spent. So when we initially had those funds, the council at that time directed $125,000 to parks, the $25,000 to the youth mini grant, and then some other projects. But that's kind of where that fund came from. It's not necessarily specific to public safety, although it can be used for that. But it's not.
So that definition can be expanded or reduced for whatever specific needs we believe it should be used for.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
If I'm not mistaken, was mental health in there also?
Yes, because that was how the whole millage was presented to the public. The public actually voted. They didn't vote on a public safety fund. They voted on a mental health millage. That, and as part of the language of that millage was public safety. So that was how that was presented to the public, and the public actually voted on a mental health millage, which included public safety.
The ballot language included both public safety and mental health.
Yeah, right.
So, but only jurisdictions with police departments were allocated those additional funds.
Right.
Thank you so much. I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I did have one.
Okay, who is that?
It was me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I just found a
I
note.
can't see.
I had a note here that we lost $170,000 in the parking funds, but you know, from the previous slide from John Kazor, it's like that fund was kind of we're trying to figure that out. So I was just trying to figure out, if we never had that money there, then how did we lose $170,000?
Good question.
So what happened to the parking fund is we usually collect parking tickets, parking meters, but due to COVID, we were not able to collect. So supposed to be that fund would be able to support itself, but since to the limitations of their operations, the general fund now has to subsidize it. So that will be an increase in transfer from general fund, and then an increase in the revenue for or transfer in the parking fund.
I think
so. What would we
on a projection? You know, we normally receive in our parking fund. I mean, for our tickets and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we would take money out of the general fund, and what would we do with that money? I'm still talking about the parking. You know, if we're looking at the ticket payment that we received, why would we need to? Wouldn't that just be income coming in and not necessarily funds going out?
Yes, Mayor. So what happened was the source of revenue is not enough. So they did not collect enough due to COVID. So they don't have enough revenues. So that's a separate fund. So that fund does not have enough revenue to pay for its for the salaries and other operating expenses.
Okay, I got you now. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Okay. I was thinking it was just money coming in, but okay, I wasn't thinking about the salaries now. So how many parking attendants do we have now?
So we have two.
We have two. Are they both full-time?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we have a parking manager now too that we hired last year.
So we have 3 people working on parking.
Yes.
We would have that much money coming in from parking that we could to sustain 3 full-time employees.
Yes. So if we were able to collect 100% of our funding, then we're really close to just a balanced budget in there. So, but then our parking manager now, Bonnie Wessler, is also trying to figure out on the best way on how to operate that fund, since it's really a new fund. That's why we need to make further study about it.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and also remember, we had some parking improvements, some kiosks and things of that nature. They're still, fulfilling the parking study.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, seeing none. I guess, Mr. Basabica, you can continue.
Thank you, Mayor. So we've done the general fund, and now we're looking at the other funds. So we're looking at the debt service funds. So these are multiple funds in the city, so just put their various. And then we have our major street fund, or Fund 202. We're going to look at our public safety fund 205, capital improvement fund 414, our sidewalk fund 495, parking fund 514, and our motor pool fund 641. So this presentation will be limited to the major amendments in the fund's budget. So debt service funds. So we have 2 types of debt in the city. We have our GO bonds and our revenue bonds. And for the GO bonds, we have our Water Street, which is payable to 2031. And like our Eastern Michigan students have said a while ago, this was refunded somewhere in 2016. And we separated this bond into 2016A refunding and 2016B refunding. And so for the 2016A, the total outstanding debt for that is $6,020,000. And for fiscal year 21-22, the principal due is $495,000. And the source of funding for this is the tax millage. And for the 2016B refunding, that is, the total outstanding is $1,560,000, and principal due is $140,000. And currently, this is being paid for by the general fund. So total outstanding GO bond is $7.5 million, and total principal due is $635,000. The other debt service fund we have are the water and sewer bonds, which is under YCUA. And currently, total outstanding was $14,201,000, and principal due is $2,855,000. And the funding source for this are the water and sewer charges.
May I ask a question before we go on? How much longer do we have the water sewer bonds? Because I know those started way back when we redid all the local streets, early, I think 2003 or 2004, somewhere in there. How much longer do we have to pay on those?
Mayor, for this one, it's various. So there's different, this is not just one bond.
Okay.
So I could take a look at something here. I think it's some goes up to additional 20 years. Some are close to being paid.
Okay. So as those that are close to being paid go down, then that total outstanding would go down.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Okay, for our major street fund, so these are the major amendments. So for West Cross Wallace project, original budget was $355,000, and the cost now for this increased to $425,000. We're also adding some projects for 2021, the Forest Street Bridge rehab, $40,000, and the North Huron River Drive, 100,000. For fiscal year 21-22, we're increasing the cost for the County Street Millage project from 211,200 up to 342,200. And then additional projects for 21-22, West Cross Parking Lane, 50,000. Forest Street Bridge rehab. So this is a continuation of the project from 2021. 196,250. North Huron River Drive, 175,000. Cross Street Bridge, 60,000. And Huron Street Pedestrian Bridge, 30,000. So this is the Public Safety Fund. We've discussed about this a while ago. So the projected revenue for this is 375,000, and it will be up to fiscal year 2026. And this is where we allocated the money for this fund. So we put in for transfer to park capital, 125,000, and then transfer to general fund, 220,000. And on the original budget, we did budget 30,000 for the contractual service for social worker. But now we're not going to spend that in this fund because it's now in the general fund, and that frees up some 30,000 in this fund. Okay, for our capital improvement fund for 2021, there will be no change for 2021. For fiscal year 21-22, we're going to increase our hardware. For our hardware, this is for the new laptops replacement schedule for our employees. We're also having the Huron Hamilton Diet, 25,000. DPS office renovation, 25,000. DPS propane filling station, 60,000. YFD office maintenance, 15,000. YFD HVAC, 35,000. And then 20,000 for building department tablets. Okay. For the sidewalk fund, the city is required to have a $120,000 project per year in compliance with ADA. And the revenue source for this, there's a 50,000 revenue that comes from Metro Act revenue and permit fees. And for fiscal year 21-22, there is going to be an increase of 32,000 in contractual service for sidewalk improvement projects. And so here is the parking fund, which had some limitations on their operations for 2021. So as we see here, their parking permit revenue was projected to be at 58,000, but now it's down to 35,000. And their parking meter revenue from 145,000 down to 35,000. And parking ticket revenue from 227,000 down to 130,000. So now there will be an increase in its revenue through the general fund of 170,000. And also there's going to be a decrease in their capital project from 50,000 to 30,000. And for fiscal year 21-22, for the parking ticket revenue, there will be a decrease of 57,000 from 257 to 200, and then transfer from general fund 12,000, and increase in capital project 70,000. For our motor pool, for fiscal year 2021, DPS motor pool will be decreased from 413,000 and down to 140,000. This is due to the street sweeper for 240,000. We're not going to purchase that this time, and will be moved on the later years. And the DPS supervisor vehicle, 33,000. Again, it will be moved forward. And then for fiscal year 21-22, there will be no change. There's no change from the original budget that was previously approved. For our employee changes for fiscal year 21-22, so we're proposing that the building secretary be to become from part-time to full-time. And then we're proposing to hire 1 social worker, 1 communications director, and 3 equipment operators. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a lot of work. We really appreciate all the work that you and city manager and staff have put into presenting this budget to us. Are there any questions or comments from council? Mr. Wilcoxon.
I didn't even raise my hand yet. Gosh.
I'm getting to know your looks.
Well, thank you. I did have a couple questions. I just realized you know, when you were talking about the public safety fund earlier, and you know, people got the impression from the wording on the ballot proposal that was about mental health, and they didn't get that there was unencumbered funds that could be spent on anything, and that was kind of a rebate of sorts because we had our own police department. And there's been a lot of talk in the last year for sure about, you know, mental health in as relates to the police department versus the social work and things like that. And so I just had a question about the you know, when you're looking at that fund, we're taking, you know, $125,000 for the parks, we're taking $220,000 out of that and putting it in the general fund, and then saying that we're going to fund the social worker from the general fund. And I was just wondering, you know, is there an advantage to doing that versus just paying the social worker directly out of that fund and transferring less over to the general fund?
Our concept is always to our like best practice is if you hire an employee as much as we can, we want to fund it with like a revenue that's also consistent to it. Since looking at the public safety fund, this is only available to us up to 2026, and once we put that social worker in there, we may run out of funding. And we might be able, it's like, yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And is the $32,000 increase in sidewalk fund related to increased ADA compliance?
I think, Ron, are you able to, Mr. Akers will probably be able to answer that. I think it's for.
It is to continue the ADA program that we started. And then there's some other sidewalk work that needs to be completed.
Okay.
Taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would council like me to stop sharing my screen before we move on?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Good to be able to see everybody who's here. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I did notice that Mr. Hobbs, Chief Hobbs asked for some more officers, some more firefighters. Are we going to be able to give him any? And I happened to run into Mr. Holman today, and just in conversation, he was saying, and Mr. Akers, jump in here, please, that DPS could actually use some more hands there also. Chief Hobbs.
I'll go first. The fire department's fully staffed from previous budgets. Our problem was getting people into place. I think there was a mention of, and Reagan, I believe, mistakenly said Chief Hobbs when he meant Chief DeGusti had asked for 3 police officers, but we're currently fully staffed in fire. I'm not asking for any personnel.
Okay, I thought maybe I heard it wrong then. Okay. Chief, you're asking for 3 extra officers?
This is the same carryover request from last time we did the budget. I requested 3 to try and beef back up patrol as we move towards the community policing model that I presented several months ago.
Okay. Are there any Is there any possibility of getting, if not 3, getting him some officers out of the safety fund?
I'd like to see at least one officer, and I'm also looking at, and I haven't discussed this with him, but because this just came to my attention recently, speaking to a county employee, the fact that our offices are not open all the time. And we've talked about this before, and they get a lot of customers coming over to the 14A court trying to get in the police department because we have limited hours. So I'm interested because it is public safety. People need to feel that they can go to the police department and open the door.
Right.
So I hadn't discussed that with the chief. I know he did the numbers before, but Chief, how do you feel about that, having one officer and that additional FTE so that our doors are still, that they can go back open to the public?
So if you're talking about keeping the lobby open 24 hours a day for people to have access, it's going to take a lot more than one FTE. We haven't had the lobby open since we gave up dispatch to Washtenaw County. Because quite frankly, on a night shift, depending on how it's staffed, the supervisor in the station might actually also be out on the road. So it would take more than one FTE to keep the lobby open.
Okay, and would that be possibly 3 officers?
I'm sorry?
Would that possibly be 3 officers?
The 3 officers actually were looking to be put on patrol, not necessarily to man the station. I'd have to look and see what it would require, numbers wise, as far as, keeping somebody on the desk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I could get that back to you, but that would be a substantial cost.
Okay, I didn't mean to throw that on you because I know that we're fully staffed for officers, and this 3 additional would just help you to do some other things. But I also think that that's important. So let's talk about that. And again, I apologize for throwing this on you, but it just came to me. I got a phone call from an employee just the other day at the, they're saying, people are coming over here all the time because,
they can't get in.
They can't get in.
Yeah,
What do
yeah, we
do?
haven't had a 24-hour lobby since whatever year it was. We went to dispatch just before I came here.
Okay.
I want to say that was the beginning of Chief Walker's term in office. So
If you could,
at least 10, 11 years.
If you could bring us those numbers, possibly give them to me and I can forward them to council, and that could be something they could consider and
Sure.
go to up or down, how they feel about that. Yeah, thanks, Chief. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Akers, I see you joined us. Did you have something for us?
Well, I apologize, Mayor. You were asking about our staffing increase proposal, correct?
Right.
So what we had done at DPS is we looked at a minimum staffing level to address some of the areas where we haven't been able to perform regular routine maintenance at. Primarily, we looked at addressing grass cutting in the city, which has been a recurring complaint that we've received. And we looked at addressing storm sewer maintenance and some additional tree trimming. And so as part of that analysis, we came to the conclusion that to get us to a minimum staffing level where we're predictably taking care of these things, we needed an additional 2 equipment operators to bring our total field staff up to 20. Right now, we're currently at 18. This would bring us up to 20. The advantage of this is it would allow us to assign 4 individuals to our parks department, so we'd be able to perform routine park maintenance. 4 was actually the number of individuals who were assigned to the parks department before it was dissolved several years ago. So that should put us to a regular level. It will also allow us to assign margin grass cutting from our roads division into our parks division, which will free up time for our roads division division employees to do storm sewer cleaning, tree maintenance, pothole patching. And then lastly, the other thing that we're going to be proposing as part of this proposal is to complete abatement grass cutting. So rather than having our community development department contract out with a private company to do grass cuttings for abatements and ordinance enforcement, that would actually be able to be handled by DPS. And so there'd be some cost recovery from that as well. So we're pretty comfortable that this will put us in a good spot to make sure that we're adequately meeting all of the minimum services that we're supposed to be for the city.
So actually you're saying that you need a couple of more bodies.
Yes, we are proposing 2 in the current budget.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Council or staff? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. I want to thank again our finance director and our city manager for a job well done with the budget, and the rest of the staff. Thank you for your time and your energy and the work that you did in presenting the budget to us. And if I'm understanding it correct, we have one more reading of the budget before we vote on it. Correct? Okay. All right. So if council would like to go over the budget and come back, we will have it. We will once again on the 18th have the budget before us for a vote. No, I guess we vote. Do we vote on the 18th? Yes.
Mayor,
So-
the first reading is tonight. The next section of the agenda is ordinance first reading, starting with the tax levy ordinance, then followed by the budget amendment ordinance.
Okay.
So if it's all right with council, I'll go ahead and read that first resolution.
Yes, please do.
Resolved by the council of the city of Ypsilanti that the proposed ordinance entitled 2021-2022 tax levy ordinance be approved on first reading.
Is there a motion? Support?
So move.
Support.
Okay, thank you. Discussion. Okay, seeing no discussion. Are we ready to vote?
Mayor, we'll have to open the public hearing first.
All right, thank you.
I'll move to open the public hearing for the tax levy resolution.
The opening the public hearing doesn't require a vote.
Oh,
only
okay, sorry.
public hearing. And there is one individual with their hand raised in the attendees list. I'll allow them to speak now. You'll have 3 minutes. And the first speaker is Lamar Weir.
Good evening, everyone. Lamar Weir from Congresswoman Dingell's office. Just had a quick follow-up question. So you all were recommending 2 or 3 additional police officers with the budget.
He was, I believe the chief was asking for 3. Correct, Chief?
Yes, Mayor, can I answer?
Yes, you may.
Yes. So the chief did request for 3 additional police officers, but that was not included in the budget. So that on our slides, I've placed there that there was a request. I just wanted to let council know that there was a request for 3 additional police officers, but that is not in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Weir?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other audience?
No other individuals in the attendees list does have their hand raised. We can give them a moment if they would like to make comment. Seeing no hands raised, I'll move on to the resolution to close the public hearing. Resolved by the council of the city of Ypsilanti that the public hearing on the proposed ordinance entitled 2021-2022 tax levy ordinance be officially closed.
Support.
It's been moved and supported to close public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I heard 2 ayes.
Aye.
I've got 4.
That's 3. Aye, that makes 4. Oppose? Okay, those that did not vote aye, are you opposing or? are you- Okay, thank you. All right. All right, the motion carried. Okay. Now, is there any discussion on the resolution from council? Any questions? Okay, seeing and hearing none, would you call the roll, Clerk Kalinga?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
That's awesome.
Mr. Jones Chance,
We're not hearing you.
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wilcoxen. We needed that one. All right, thank you. Mr. Alinga, the next resolution, please.
Council, the next item on the agenda is ordinance 1376, an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to amend budget appropriations by a department and major organizational unit for fiscal year 2020, 2021, and fiscal year 2021, 2022. Resolved by the council of the city of Ypsilanti that an ordinance entitled, an ordinance to amend budget appropriations by department and major organizational unit for the fiscal year 2020, 2021, and 2021, 2022 be approved on first reading. Further, that in accordance with section 19.2 of Public Act 621 of 1978, also known as the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act, parameters are hereby given to allow the city manager's authority to approve budget transfers between programs within the same fund, and council may authorize transfers between funds. Department heads may transfer funds between accounts within a specific program under the direction within the exemption of the personnel capital expenditures, which must be approved by the city manager.
So move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion. Do we have to have an open, a public hearing on this one also?
Yes, you do.
Okay, public hearing is now open.
Council, there is currently no one with their hand raised. If anyone in the attendees list would like to make comment, please raise your hand. You'll have 3 minutes to do so. Not seeing any, I'll read the resolution to close the public hearing. Resolved by the council of the city of Ypsilanti that the public hearing for an ordinance to amend budget appropriations by department and major organizational unit for the fiscal year 2020-2021 and 2021-2022 be officially closed.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Any discussion?
I just had one question.
Yes, Mr. Wilcoxen had his hand up.
I'll defer to Mr. Morgan.
No, my picture hand is up.
This is just to close the public hearing.
Yeah, we just to close the public hearing to open up for questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Morgan.
I just was wondering, with the Public Act 621 of 1978, were there any major changes since that time, or does that act stand as it is, to give the city managers the same powers? Like, so there haven't been any major changes since 1978 that would affect the powers that the city manager or council have?
Mr. Barr, could you answer that for us, please? Mr. Barr, could you answer? Is he here?
I'm not aware of any amendments myself.
Okay, because it
Okay.
could have been changed to a city clerk and 2 council members or anything, but if that's the city manager's authority solely to approve budget transfer, I just want to know if there was any other language since 78.
Oh, and it's always or her or his or her designee, you know, if I'm not there,
Okay.
but that is how it reads.
Thank you, City Manager. Mr. Wilcoxon.
Yeah, I'd like to turn to page 271 of the budget, and no, I'm just kidding. I did have a couple questions about major streets to motor pool. I mean, I know that like you've changed the way that the accounting goes in terms of motor pool is you know, basically rentals from each of the departments. There seem to be a lot of 4,000 numbers that are transferring money into there, and I was curious about the significance of those transfers. Maybe Reagan could answer that question. I was like,
Good evening, council member. So those transfers are just the rental rates for the use of the motor pool. So in Major Street, whenever they used our equipment, they would have to pay a rental fee for the use of the equipment.
so when we do capital improvements for these large trucks and things, how does that get distributed through the budget later on? Are they still, if there's a capital improvement cost for a major piece of equipment that's in the motor pool, then does that then get transferred in subsequent years into the motor pool and they're renting that back, or how does that work?
So the expenses are just accounted for in the motor pool fund. So that includes the operating, and then the capital purchases are also accounted for in the motor pool fund. And a way to fund those expenditures is to charge the different funds for the use of those equipment. So in the case of Major Street, so there will be revenue coming in as a transfer from or rental revenue from the Major Street going to the motor pool fund. So there's revenue coming in. And then you will see there that there's also an expenditure account where you will see the operating and capital expenses for that particular vehicle or
Second question is major to local street transfer, and Mr. Kazor kind of briefly touched on this earlier, and I'm wondering what the criteria is for doing that, because I know that the major street comes from, you get outside funding for that, and our local streets seem to be funded pretty well, but he was alluding to that is going to change. So it's like, what is the criteria for transferring between those two funds?
Yeah, I believe when it comes to major to local street, we could transfer up to 10% of. There's a provision in there when it comes to transfers to local street. I could provide you those parameters. I can't think of it right now.
Okay, that'll be fine. Follow-up's fine. And I have a procedural question for Andrew. So when an ordinance is read the first time and there's a unanimous vote on it, accepting it, then that goes straight into consent agenda, right?
Typically, yes, but not for budget items.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you. Reagan, I just have two questions for you, I think. The first one was, okay, for the mental health grants, the youth grants, was that the same 25K that was allotted for this? Because I just can't find it in the budget. Can you tell me where it is maybe?
So if you have the PDF copy of the budget book, are we able to show that, Andrew? Let me take a look.
Okay, thank you.
Oops. It's on 182 or on the PDF.
I'm just gonna write that down and come back to it, but okay, thank you. 182. And then my second question, I guess is for Reagan and the chief of police. So you said that our budget was close to being balanced, Reagan, and then you added on to the presentation what requests were made that were not input into the budget. And so as I was thinking about that previous conversation about even keeping the offices open, I guess my question was, just because you're our numbers person and I'm not that great at it, how much would it offset the budget to if we were to provide the 3 officers, like the maximum, the request that was given, just to have those numbers like clear to me?
So currently our shortfall for 21-22 is 413,000, and the cost for the police officer is around 238,000. But then we did not include the PA 289 funding of 430,000. So basically, if the shortfall plus the PA 289, we're close to the balanced budget, and then that will be the shortfall for the additional officers for
Okay.
238. Yeah.
Okay, so it actually that would be the shortfall if we were to add those 3. Okay, okay.
And we never, Mayor Pro Tem, we never include that in our budget, excuse me, because it's an annual allocation.
Okay.
So we don't know how much we're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's pretty much been steady over the years, so.
Okay. And then my question to the chief, I think I ask you this every budget season. I know you would like through all 3, but is that because you want one for each shift? Or like what's the rationale for the 3? Just for my better understanding.
So the 3 would be to replace the 3 we're going to displace from patrol to do the cop crew piece, which should be coming soon. The detective bureau is up and running, and we're anticipating that's going to be complete here in the next month or so. So we're going to move on to that next piece, and so that would be to maintain the shifts in the format they're in now, and to be able to add that cop crew piece without affecting patrol.
That makes total sense. I didn't think about that. Okay. Thank you. I think that's it for now. I gotta think a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments, discussion?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the parking budget. I'm interested in lowering the cost of parking permits for the downtown zone for residents. Just curious, I feel like every time we adopt the fee structure, it's mentioned to like bring this up during budget. So I'm bringing it up now just to kind of get maybe some more direction on when council needs to talk about making this adjustment. I think I mentioned this before, but the permit fee right now is just over $300 for that zone compared to $20 if you're just down the street in Normal Park. I'm just hoping to see a decrease there, so more people can actually afford to buy the permits. And I guess I'm wrong. I think the permits have increased a little bit for residents outside of that zone. But a few years ago, when I still lived in Normal Park, they were about $20 per year compared to the 300.
Councilmember Somerville, the parking permits have increased once since the inception of the parking permit program in the 90s. In the residential areas, it's 33. And then annually, downtown permits are 300. It's 115 per 3 month increment. And then this past year, there were some reduced price permits in the Washington Street lot. I believe those, and Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, they are 150 annually.
Yes, they're 150 annually, and each of those permit classifications is also prorated monthly and has a 4-month option as well. So if immediate cost is an issue, then we can offer options to our residents. The outlying residential permits are not prorated.
Okay, so I guess but the time to bring up lowering the cost would be now. Is that?
It would be when we do our fee schedule. And I think that's scheduled to come to us the meeting right after we approve the budget. Am I right, Andrew? That would be our second meeting in June, unless.
I believe it's currently scheduled for June 1st.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, are we ready for the vote?
I believe so.
Mr. Halenga, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Council, next item on the agenda is the consent, and I will go ahead and read that now. Resolution number 2021-088, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following items be approved. Resolution number 2021-089, approving the minutes of April 20th, 2021. Resolution number 2021-091, accepting the city clerk evaluation.
Support.
Is there support? Did you make the motion?
I'm sorry, I meant so moved. That's what I meant.
I'll support.
All right, thank you. All in favor, is this a voice vote?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Council, moving on to the next section of the agenda, resolutions, motions, and discussions. Resolution number 2021-090, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following residents be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti boards and commissions as indicated below. Michael Simmons, Planning Commission; Jessica Donnelly, Planning Commission; Yvonne Abdu, Human Relations; Georgina Hickey, ZBA; Julia Behe, Sustainability.
I'll move.
Support.
Okay. It's been moved and supported. Discussion. I have a question. Okay, Mr. Wilcoxen.
I wanted to take this out of the consent agenda for a number of reasons, but these things come up and we've had a lot of conversations in the past, and I've talked with Andrew this past week about the conversations we had about having attendance put in here, and I was going to bring this up later, but I'll just mention it now. It's not particularly relevant to this, but I wanted to bring this out because these commissions have been an issue over the last year or so, and so there were these are some great candidates in here. Georgina Hickey, I know, and has been an alternate on the zoning board, and has asked to be reappointed as a frontline person. Michael Simmons is an awesome guy on the planning commission, and Julia Behe for the sustainability commission. There have been some questions about her eligibility, and I discussed this with Andrew, and I discussed this with her as well. And so some people have questioned whether she's eligible to do this. And I wanted to address that. She does live in the city, and some people question that. Apparently she's not registered to vote in the city, but that's not the requirement. And so I wanted to make that clear going into this. Also, there has been some there have been some issues in the last year on the Sustainability Commission. And I raised these concerns, and I sent emails around to colleagues. I apologize, Mayor, that I didn't get to have that conversation with you, but I had made some statements in those emails, and I just wanted to address those now. Those issues that came up. There were some significant communications issues with the chair, between Julie and the chair, and I talked with her about it, and she gave me some history that I didn't have previously, and so I'm going to work with her and the chair of that commission to work on that. Her contributions to the Sustainability Commission are that she has maintained the Facebook page for that and dealt with all the communication for that. She's also been the point person for all of the Earth Day celebrations and programs for the city through the Sustainability Commission for the last several years. And so that email that I sent out, I apologize for being reactionary on that, but I now support that she will be reappointed to that commission. And I will work with her and the chair to resolve the communications issues that have been a problem in the past. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Any other discussion? Mr. Barr. Good evening.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Murphy's Law is in effect tonight. My computer died. I've been trying to cobble together some ability to get on the meeting. To answer Councilmember Morgan's question, there have been a number of changes in the finance law for the state of Michigan, but in regard to the question, I don't think there was anything that changed the power of the city manager or the staff. So, and in regard to that question.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Barr.
you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the appointments to boards and commissions? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Halenga, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Council, moving on to the next resolution, resolution number 2021-092, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas City Council was provided a presentation regarding the installation of fiber optics and Wi-Fi kiosks throughout the city by Strategic Alliance CDC. And whereas bridging the digital divide would create more equitable access to technology vital for education and business growth. And whereas City Council was informed this project would not require financial backing from the city for the duration of the 20-year contract. And whereas City Council requested staff evaluate the program. And whereas approval of a letter of intent is needed to move forward to acquire financing for the project. And whereas a negotiated contract would be brought to City Council for approval prior to implementation of the project. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council direct the city manager to draft and provide a letter of intent to Strategic Alliance CDC to begin accessing funding for project implementation.
So move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion, questions? Presentation to city manager. Yes.
Good afternoon, council. Per your direction by motion, I believe it was a month or so ago, staff was directed to explore the company's strategic alliance. We met with Jason Dixon to discuss his proposal as relates to providing fiber optics and connectivity in the city of Ypsilanti. And that is what you see in the resolution. We did request some documents, but I don't think we received them. We did receive some support letters that they have received. And at this point, we do not object. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. It looks like I had stopped my computer. So staff does not object, but staff does have questions. And I'm hoping that Mr. Dixon can fill in those gaps during his presentation on tonight. Mr. Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
You can go ahead and present to council. You know, the questions that we had for you was about the length of the contract. If it was, and I know you said it was 20 years. And we also had questions about the maintenance of the equipment. We also had questions about the investors. And I know that you said there was Kellogg, but we weren't able to get the actual documentation to show that. So we would like you to kind of comment on those things as far as, and I know you did tell us that you have additional and supporters, municipalities, namely Muskegon Heights, I believe you named, and Oak Park.
Yeah, I sent the package over. I sent over another package. And it was additional things that I already sent over.
Okay, if you don't.
And I actually had them draft a new letter that it said it would be no finances to you guys.
Okay, and did you send that to myself and the clerk?
I believe I sent that to that email address that was sent to me right after the meeting we had.
Okay.
And I can check it out and resend it.
Okay.
But yeah, we did send that information over.
Okay.
So the information that we didn't send over was a maintenance agreement for the project yet, because we don't have the actual manufacturers inked on a deal for these programs yet. We have manufacturers that want to be at the table, but we can't do that until after we solidify the agreements.
Mm-hmm.
So how this works, so like with Kellogg, how this works is I bring the cities that need the assistance because we know they can't afford this to move their community forward. And then they say, okay, well, these are the cities that we're going to work with. We'll raise this capital for these cities and implement the project. As we do that, we also have the relationship with Flagstar Bank, now New York Banking Company, because they want this to go. Flagstar and Kellogg now are partnering to do this across the country. So what I'm supposed to do is get the letters of intent, and then as we work through the process, because this is not this is a new opportunity. This is a new process that we came up with to help out low to moderate income communities to move forward. So all the questions that you have don't get answered at this time, but what it does is it starts the process for the opportunity.
So basically, we're just signing on, mayor and council. And Mr. Dixon, am I right that it's a possibility that it may not go forward? It's a possibility that it will, but there's also that possibility that it wouldn't, and we would not be held liable for anything.
That's a strong possibility, because you have to look at, as we go move forward and we say, okay, well, it's time for us to do the installation. We're still coming back to the council to go over the process of that, what that documentation looks like. This is just to get the party started.
Mhm. Right. And we can still say no at that point.
You can say no at that point.
Okay. So this is just asking for council, it's only asking for a letter of intent to help them as they go and continue to get investors. And then as things progress, we will enter into contracts, everything subject to approval by our city attorney.
Absolutely.
But they haven't gotten that far down the road. So
Is there,
whatever the decision is of council.
I see your hand, Mr. Morgan.
Staff will support. We didn't have any major objections. We understand this is a pilot program with no upfront costs, no legacy costs, no maintenance costs. And that's pretty much it. We know that we need it. We do fall into that category of communities that are lacking in this area. So at this time, if you have any questions for Mr. Dixon, please ask him. That is why we are here. We have him here on today.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, I saw your hand up. Do you still have a question or comment?
Both. Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for being here again. My question, I know since it's a lot of costs not being covered by the city and a lot of different services being provided with this joint venture, and with these letters of recommendation, I want to know, to protect the city or to be like a fail safe, when we're waiting, once we provide the letter of support, can we reserve the right, like, to back out if funding for the project implementation hasn't been developed in 2 years, or once they develop how much it costs, at least 10% of the total projected costs have not been accrued yet? Like, so what I'm saying is, if we have it won't make sense to have a letter of support for 6 years just hanging and we haven't secured funding or haven't secured a percentage of what we needed. So like with some of the cities right now, like with Inkster, I know it's a pilot program. Do you foresee an amount of time to accompany those letters of support to find projected income?
Good question. So with the letter for Inkster, what happened with Inkster, Inkster actually got the party started to be able to do this type of opportunity when they wanted to take it across the country. So as we did with Inkster, Inkster's a $20 million project. They're halfway done raising the money. It looks like we're gonna put a shovel in the ground in September, if all goes right with all departments, with the Downtown Development Authority, because all of them already have gave us letters of support. If you look at the package that I sent you guys,
right,
letters of intent to get this done, and then we just go through the next steps. And if you want to, anytime you want to pull out, I can't stop you from.
So what I'm asking, so how long has it been from the time that they decided to do it to they provided the letter of support? And it's a $20 million project. How much of that 20 million has already been set aside?
They $5 million.
Okay. So they $5 million to still. So you're still searching for $15 million?
No, we're not searching. We're not searching. Kellogg and Flagstar is putting the money together. We're not searching at all. If you look at the letters that we sent, the letters, the same letter that we use for Inkster, it's the same letter for now for what we're doing as we bring these cities on, right? So we have the Office of Comptroller for the federal government now working with us to get this done. So it's not like we're searching. What we're doing is we're getting cities in preparation for it. But I have no problem if you want to put that in the document. That's okay with me.
What I'm saying is, if Flagstar and Kellogg got $200 million, they should know they could do a certain amount of cities based on how much it costs.
That's not how this is working, because you got to remember, number one, we're responding to a pandemic.
Okay.
You got to remember, we're responding to an emergency. We actually did start this prior to the pandemic, so we wouldn't be in this position. But now they're coming to the table with us because we had already started this process, right? So I can't give you an answer on that, because this is something that they're responding to, a pandemic, something that hasn't happened like this before. And at the end of the day, the low to moderate income communities, the kids really are the ones that's falling behind over probably a decade at this time. So in response to that, you know, just like the pandemic, people have to be patient to find out how we go from one spot to the next spot to make sure we can get this goal accomplished. You also have a bill that's already out from the Biden administration, but we don't even know how long that takes. So we're talking about government when it talks about infrastructure. So what we're doing is we're being proactive at this time instead of reactionary.
I understand. Thank you. So if it was a certain point where whatever you're asking for, like, well, if you couldn't make good on your end, you would relay that to the cities and say, we thought we could make this, but you know what? We just can't do it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So let me be clear on something. The process when it talks about Section 8 to home ownership, those are programs we can start regardless, right? So you're going to have activity regardless of what happens with the fiber optics, because that's important. As we going through this process with Inkster, we're building a technology system to be able to train in networking and telecommunications. And so at the end of the day, things are still going to be moving. And as we move in that process and we have these letters, we still have an opportunity to talk to our legislators in the federal government to say, look, we have community development opportunities because we already have this letter and we have the support from a bank and one of the largest foundations in the world.
Okay,
so when you play, and we have the NBA on our team.
Okay, and last, I appreciate that. This is the last question.
Sure.
What you just said. It just went through. I was about to ask. It went over my head. I'm sorry for interrupting you. What was I going to ask? You got to come back to me, but thank you so much. It'll hit me if it does. I'll raise my hand again.
And what I will ask is if you guys can give me a point person to talk to, where we can, as we go through this process, because we're going through this process with other cities across the country, where we're going to be like your public housing, the director of public housing, those type of people, your some of the people that's on your committees. As we move forward, we're going to have meetings on a regular basis, probably a monthly meeting where we're going to talk to everyone that's in our program across the country. So we can give those updates, make sure we have the documentation, make sure we understand what changes you might have in your community so we can address them accordingly. Because one of the things that we have with the Office of Comptroller, the Office of Comptroller for the federal government, they direct where money goes in communities. And most folks in most cities don't even have a clue about the Office of Comptroller, because I asked them, I said, how many cities actually write you guys a letter about opportunities they need? They said none.
So thank you so much for that follow-up. Here's the question. It seems like a lot of different programs are a la carte. You have a main goal and you have other supporting goals, and we don't have to opt into everything you provide. We can take what's best for our city. Is that correct? Or must we invest in everything that you have to offer?
So let's look at what I have to offer. You guys down the road will have a budget shortfall if you don't have people purchasing homes and things like that, because you need taxation, right? So we're talking about taking a population of low to moderate income people, Section 8 voucher, that a policy that's been in action for 20 years and haven't been used. And I got a bank to say, we'll take these folks in this community and take them through a process of home ownership in your community. And you wouldn't want that? Well, let's look at that. Doesn't make sense if you wouldn't, but if that's how you want to do it, that's less work for us. But you're taking advantage of people, minorities, so to speak, to have home ownership. They can transfer wealth from one generation to the next. So then the next part, training and technology. If you look at the numbers across the country, when you look at African Americans, Latinos in these communities, they're not even on a scale of less than 3% when it comes to technology and education. So those are the things that we're offering. So when you look at that, we're offering everything that's a need to a community. That's why Kellogg wants to take the system that we put together as a system, a process, home ownership, financial literacy, home ownership, workforce development, implementation. So then the people that in your community can actually implement the process. Let's be clear, it's all in economics for your community. And it's all a push for your city to be better.
I appreciate the lens you see it from, Mr. Dixon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dixon. So I guess I apologize if my questions are going to be a little redundant because I think Councilman Morgan was kind of asked some of the things that I'm thinking about. But first, I wanted to go back that when this resolution was just presented to RFL, it talked about the documentation that was requested, and you said that it was submitted, but we didn't receive it, or you're unsure if we received it, because
I'm unsure if you guys received, but I know I had them put another letter together. My team put another letter together to say there was no cost to you guys and what the letter of intent looks like.
Okay, is there?
And I can always resend that. It's on my desktop, but I don't know why you didn't receive it.
I would love to get that again, just for my own
sure.
But I have understanding. And then, is there anything from Kellogg that talks about the partnership with you? Is that in the letter? Is that not?
No, no. The only letter I have of the partnership is with Flagstar Bank, but they're not allowed to do that.
Okay, they can't. Okay.
No, Kellogg can't. They're not allowed to do. You don't know about a grant with Kellogg until they push the button with the check.
Right.
They don't do that.
Okay. And then looking at the letters that you have attached here, like for instance, many of the entities that provided letters I'm very, very familiar with because I actually work in Inkster. And so my question for you there is around, so I see these support letters from like 2019, and you may have already said this is the part that I think might be redundant, but what is the gap in time that has been like for 2 years, that what has happened in Inkster thus far? Like for instance, with these letters that you've received.
So we've already done the mapping for Inkster. We've already brought, actually had Flagstar came to talk to the mayor in Inkster and the city council and told them what their process is. Kellogg had a meeting with the mayor of Inkster with their one person from their planning committee, and they actually was invited to the fundraising meeting they had when they brought, for the project. So those are things that's been happening since then.
But none of the actual like tangible like fiber optic technology, none of those things or trainings have occurred, just the preliminary piece.
No, the home ownership piece have.
Okay.
The financial literacy and the home ownership piece they actually shut that down when COVID came. And we actually have 3 people in the pipeline right now for home ownership that went from a 580 to a 690. And they're in the process right now of getting homes from Flagstar with through their program.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council?
I had one.
Mr. Wilcoxon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dixon, and thank you, City Manager McMullen, for clarifying some of these issues up front. The letter of intent, we've covered that. That's it's commitment to some in spirit, right? And so I'm just curious as to what exactly the letter of intent will include.
So if you look at the, it's actually the letters of intent. I sent the letter of intent over that Inkster put together. So you'll have what it looks like in there. And all it does is states that you're on board with the home ownership, the training, and the consent to do a fiber optic ring. That's it. So all it is saying when we go to places to say, hey, they're on board with this, they want this changed for their community. That's all it is saying, because I can't say that, hey, we want to raise money for Ypsilanti to get this done. And they're going to say, well, where's the information from Ypsilanti to say that? That's why I sent over all the letters that we already had to show you that this is the process.
So earlier when you were talking, I noticed that your pronouns changed, and you went from we to they in terms of Inkster raising money. And I don't know if that was a slip or if that was intentional. Who's raising the money?
So Flagstar and Kellogg are going to foundations, and they're putting the money there that way. The NBA is putting a package together to help Kellogg with this process. It's a letter in there from Chauncey Billups that says what he's going to do for the program.
Right, I saw those. So they being not the city of Inkster per se, but the other
entities.
financial institutions such as Kellogg's and Flagstar that are seeking investors, right?
Yes, they're going to other foundations.
Gotcha.
And corporate, and they're going through corporate responsibility.
All right, that's all the questions I had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Dixon, if I allow you to share your screen, can you just bring up that letter that you had previously sent to myself?
Sure.
And manager?
Let me get to it. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
And I'm gonna see where I added the language for you. Right there. So here's what I want you to think about too. The bill gets passed for infrastructure, right? And then you have nobody in your community that's trained for implementation. Then you know how they say that you got people in the city of Detroit that could have worked on the Little Caesars Arena. It's because we knew for 10 years that that arena was going to be put together, but we never prepared for the arena. So we need to pay attention to our past so we can help our future, and that's why we're looking at this the way that we're doing it. Would you like me to scroll up?
Okay.
Y'all done?
Yes, please. Council, are we ready to move the letter down or take it down?
Take it down, ma'am.
No, I'm asking council if they're ready.
And I can resend it. I don't know how come it didn't go through. But I thought you guys had it.
We're kind of in the middle of the two pages now, so if we could go. There we go. Thank you.
Is that 3-year implementation plan 3 years from the time you receive funding, or a total of 3 years to get it in the ground?
It's a 3 years once we get funding to get the whole city done. Now you got to remember, we're not talking about using existing poles. This is all boring underground to each property that's in Ypsilanti.
How does this dovetail with the fiber optics that's already been laid in this city?
It actually can be connected. So you have a backbone that comes in, and wherever that backbone comes from, they can be connected. So we'll look at what's already existing that's going, and you don't have really any fiber that's going directly to the home. So it's just, we'll look at, what's already there, and, you go alongside it or you tie into it, depending on whose fiber it is. And you're able to connect to it. So.
And so that relationship with the current provider is negotiated by you, or does that have to be negotiated by the city?
That's between us and the provider. Because 9 times out of 10, from my understanding, if it's not something that we have to use, we don't have to use it. But if it's advantageous to use it, we will. Our goal is just to make sure everybody's connected. That's our goal.
So if some point down the line, if we decided that, these fiber optics that were placed underground are no longer useful to us because technology has advanced, we would be responsible for the removal, or you?
So let's talk about what fiber optics is. Fiber optics, so you can understand that the position on the answer I'm going to give you. Fiber optics is replacing copper wire. Let's look how long copper wire has been along the line of telecommunications. That's not something that goes to get obsolete. You just add more. It's not something that you remove either.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments or discussion?
Mayor, I do have a question, but it's for Mr. Barr. Mr. Barr, we currently have a franchise agreement with Comcast. If we move forward with this, would this at all affect that agreement? Mr. Barr?
Well, I hope he. If I'm understanding this correctly, and I'm not trying to, I think Mr. Barr might have heard us and is trying to get on. This has a lot to do with training it will provide services, digital services, but a lot of the, if I'm understanding and reading correctly, a lot of has to do with training our youth, our young people. Am I correct, Mr. Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
That to me, what I'm reading or understanding, that sounds like the heart of the program. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. But we're training the young people in the community so they can be the technicians to put
Right.
the infrastructure in. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I mean, I was understanding. Thank you.
I got a question.
There's Mr. Barr. Okay. Mr. Barr, you were going to, Andrew had a question for you. Andrew, Mr. Herling, would you repeat your question?
Yes, Mr. Barr. So we currently have a franchise agreement with Comcast. And if we move forward with this, would this have any effect on that agreement? Mr. Barr? You're
muted. Are you still having technical difficulties?
Looks like you're on there twice. I'm trying to ask you to unmute.
I guess while we're waiting, I have a quick question. So I feel like I'm getting mixed information on this. So this is not, the intent is not to install fiber optics. It's to train youth to be able to get employed by the companies such as like Comcast or AT&T that install fiber optics.
It's both.
Yeah, that I hear both.
It's both. So let's say this. Here's what happens in our communities. You have an infrastructure project and people from our community are not able to participate. We're making sure that they're able to participate. Here's the second thing. Comcast and AT&T has not put true fiber optics in our community when it comes to 1 gigabyte. So if you do your measurements and it goes in low to moderate income communities, they're not, and I'll send you some data on that. They're not putting the investment in those communities because there's no ROI. And that's why we're having a problem we're having with connectivity in these communities.
Okay, so just like a follow-up question.
Sure.
Is the intent to like help cover them to go to like a training out of like a school like WCC or?
So we're actually putting the training models together with Nokia and Sienna. So we're actually working directly with the manufacturers.
And Nokia is going to be implementing their own fiber optic broadband services?
No, we are installing the fiber optic. We're using the manufacturer's product. Nokia is the manufacturer. And we're doing it. Nokia is helping us train young people in the community.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we're going direct. So we don't have to worry about if somebody else is going to come to the community and doesn't be able to participate economically.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barr, are you able to respond now? Is your technology complying? It appears he's frozen. Council, does anyone still need the screen shared?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Who's speaking?
It was someone from the attendee list.
Oh,
You got it. But is Mr. Barr going now?
Mr. Barr, are you unfrozen? Are you?
Doesn't appear that he's on anymore.
Okay.
So it is my understanding that Mr. Dixon is facing a timetable. Am I right, Mr. Dixon?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
Letter by
14th.
of May.
I also understand that, and I'm certainly cannot answer for Mr. Barr, but what I'm hearing from Mr. Dixon, I can't really see how that would affect our agreement with Comcast. That's why I was asking about the training, the emphasis on training.
So if we wanted the answer from Mr. Barr, just in case, because I think that is, you know,
Oh, I
interesting to know, is the deadline on the 14th for something specific? Like it's a hard deadline that you have to have it?
Yeah, I'm supposed to turn these letters into Kellogg by the 14th.
Oh, I definitely wasn't saying that we wouldn't get an answer from Mr. Barr. I was just saying, you know, what I'm hearing.
So let me add some value. If you look across the country in low to moderate income communities, those low to moderate income communities are the only places around the country is having a problem with the digital divide, right? We have Comcast, we have AT&T, we have Spectrum all over the country. But you know, and they're on the stock market, right? So that means they can raise money and shares to do what they want to do when they want to do it at. But as we see, the value's not there. And that's why we're having this problem. So in order to solve the problem, you know, you got to do different things differently. Oh, there's Mr. Barr.
Yes, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I'm gonna hang up, Francis, if it's okay.
Thank you.
This is very embarrassing. I'm sorry, the Zoom works and then it stops working. Anyway.
That's fiber optic.
The Comcast contract that we have now is for service to the city itself. And it's not necessarily for other service, although they have a franchise in the city, which is non-exclusive to lay cable and have customers in the city. In my opinion right now, it would not stop this other adventure. But I can check that in the morning and make sure.
Thank you. Mr. Jones-Chance, is your hand up?
Yep.
Okay.
So it seems to me that even if, you know, there were some issue with Comcast, that we could use the other bits and parts of this program anyway. So from what I'm gathering, it's not costing us anything. We can back out pretty much whenever. And if we don't want a particular service, we don't have to have it. And there's potential upside. I might be missing some of the complexity, but I kind of feel like we're we might want to vote on this.
So are you calling the question?
I would love to call the question.
Okay, is there a second?
Someone please support me.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcoxon. Thank you, Mr. Jones-Chance. Okay, we're voting on a call for the question. Clerk Halinga, would you call the roll, please?
I'm calling the question. Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones-Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
On to the resolution itself. Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Dixon, thank you so very much for thinking of the city of Ypsilanti. And certainly we do have a digital divide here in the city. And it is affecting our, not only our students, but our entire population, actually. I mean, some parts of our city are up on broadband and there are other areas that are not and are lacking. So thank you very much for thinking of us and look forward to working with you and look forward to seeing our young people trained to work in the fiber optic arena. Thank you.
Thank you.
And all the best
I do
as
have a
you go
question.
forward. Yes.
Who do I follow up with to get the point person to work with?
You would follow up with the city manager, Mrs. McMullen.
All right, Ms. McMullen, thank you.
And thank you.
If you can shoot, that would be great.
One more time, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, if you could send me an email so that I can make sure the right email address.
Okay,
I'm fmcmullen@ypsilanti.com.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Before moving on, I wanted to apologize to the individual in the attendees list. When you were promoted to allow to speak, your first name is the same as our city attorney, so we thought that it was him trying to get on. And during council meetings, there is no interaction with the public. So I do apologize for that confusion. Council, moving on to resolution 2021-093. Whereas the city of Ypsilanti adopted the SHAPE Ypsilanti Master Plan in 2013, which establishes guiding values and policy recommendations for the city. Whereas the Ypsilanti Planning Commission has a responsibility of developing a master plan and any updates. Whereas the Planning Commission determined in 2018 that a master plan update was necessary. Whereas the Ypsilanti Sustainability Commission drafted a sustainability plan in which the Planning Commission subsequently determined to incorporate into the master plan update as a full chapter. Whereas the Ypsilanti City Council distributed the drafted master plan update for public comment in accordance to Public Act 33 of 2008, Michigan Planning Enabling Act. Whereas the Ypsilanti City Council resolved to be the final adopting authority of the master plan update in accordance to Public Act 33 of 2008. Whereas the Ypsilanti Planning Commission recommended City Council adopt the drafted master plan update. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council adopt the drafted master plan update.
Is there a
So
motion?
moved.
Support from anyone to support?
I'll support it.
Thank you. It's been moved and supported. Mr. Arma, you have some discussion for a presentation for us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Council.
Hello.
I don't have a huge presentation, but I just want to summarize what was in the memo. Just that obviously you saw the first part, well, you saw this plan as it was intended to be adopted back in January, and then you chose to distribute it to the public for public review comment. And we opened up public comment for the required 63 days minimum, and then also extended it to just receive some more comments because we had some time to before our next Planning Commission meeting, which was April 21st. And Planning Commission considered the public comments and ultimately chose to recommend that City Council adopt the master plan update kind of as is, but the only change that they made at this April 21st meeting was to follow City Council's resolution to plug back in the a few of the Citizen Committee for Housing Affordability and Accessibility recommendations, including the revising family and occupancy caps and visitability requirements. So I do also want to reiterate that in the next month, our planning department will be working on redesigning the document so it is more aesthetically pleasing. That won't change any of the content though that you're seeing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion? I see Councilwoman Simmons shaking her head no. Anyone else with any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, would you call the roll, please, Mr. Halinga?
Councilmember Wilcoxen,
I knew I was going to be first. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Council, moving on to the next item on the agenda, resolution number 2021-095, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas economic inequality has skyrocketed as a result of legislative inaction to pass pro-worker labor laws and properly administer the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, which has been systematically attacked and dismantled for several decades to make it more difficult for workers to form unions. And whereas the HR 842, commonly referred to as the PRO Act, is the most significant worker empowerment legislation since the Great Depression, as it stands to give workers a free and fair choice on whether to form a union, ensure workers can reach a first contract quickly after a union is recognized, and employers' practices of punishing striking workers by hiring permanent replacements, and hold bad corporations accountable with real penalties for illegally retaliating against workers who organize. And whereas the PRO Act will help make America's economy work for working people and help raise stagnant wages that have only increased a mere 9% from 1973 to 2013, while productivity has increased 74% over that same period. And whereas through the expansion of collective bargaining under the PRO Act, there will be increases in pay and protections for women, people of color, immigrants, and LGBTQ community in areas where our non-discrimination laws continue to fall short and lack adequate protections. And whereas America's economy recovery as we emerge from the greatest public health crisis in over a century must involve strong unions by making the PRO Act the law of the land, increasing worker power and rebuilding our economy fairly for all of us. And now therefore be it resolved that this body affirms its support for workers and their right to organize, and in expressing those values urges Congress to pass HR 842 to greatly increase economic opportunity in America and empower workers through the promotion and expansion of collective bargaining. And be it further resolved that the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti directs the city clerk to forward copies of this resolution to Michigan's U.S. Senators, Michigan's U.S. House of Representatives, Washtenaw County State Legislative Delegation, the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners, and the Urban Corps of Mayors of the Michigan Municipal League.
I'll move.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion, comments?
I had that correct. Was that Council Member Wilcox and then Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions, discussion?
I just have one comment. And again, this is just for the record. I do believe, like, I think some of these things, of course, this is a great thing. Significant worker empowerment since the Great Depression. However, I do think, just to be clear, when things are when they become so collective, because even with the language that's being used, it's still not addressing the issue. Because if we looked at economic inequality, it will be broken down into demographics, and then it will be broken down into race. And when they put things like, I mean, women and people of color, when you say people of color, it definitely it's not specific at all enough. And so I do think when everybody gets their slice, because it's not written to specifically the ones who are specifically by statistics at the bottom, it won't really trickle down. So I know the goal is to boost the economy through some legislation, but this is another way I feel like to level the playing field. But the playing field is already so imbalanced that I want to say that I'm hopeful. I'm not optimistic, but I do think there is a need for again, worker empowerment. So that's just, so I don't see Black in here when it's clearly that Black is at the bottom of everything. It's just not specific enough. So I do think it's going to do what it's intended to do for those it's intended to do for, but people of color could be anybody that has melanin in their skin, which is, I guess, cool, but it's just not specific enough.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, would you want to amend this to specify the people of color, or to add Black or African American in?
Yeah, I do believe we
in
should.
there?
If we're talking about specific groups like women, like immigrants, I do believe that Black or African American by definition, which is still false, but Black and African American should be specifically placed in there.
Okay, would you like to offer that as an amendment to the resolution?
I would like to add Black or African American after women, before LGBTQ somewhere, to make it more specific.
Is there support for that?
Sure, I can support that.
Yeah, support.
I do want to make a comment though.
Yes.
After this. I support the statement in this resolution, but the question is whether the HR 842 is going to do that. And with the fact that there's no affirmative action that's included in that bill, and you can't, it's not in, it's in our resolution, but it's not in the bill, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, so I guess it's a moot point if it won't be from top down.
Right.
But that's how arbitrarily unfair I believe the language is. But I'll support this for everybody and hope that those who it can help at the bottom gets some of what it's intended to do. So I would strike that amendment, since Councilman Wilcoxon brought it to the attention, which is pretty obvious that is not in the HR 842 bill.
Okay. Do you withdraw your support?
No, I still support it in our resolution. I think that,
okay,
it's a valid point that he's made. But I'm just pointing out that HR 842 is not going to have that specific kind of language in there.
Right. But he was withdrawing.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll leave that to Mr. Morgan.
All right, thank you. But it would have been in our resolution. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Halenga, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
No.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon.
Yes.
With 6 yes and 1 no vote, the motion carries.
Right, thank you.
Council, moving on to the next item on the agenda, resolution number 2021-096. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the city strongly supports safe and equitable recreation access for all of its residents and visitors. And whereas the adopted Parks and Recreation Master Plan recognizes the need for improved accessibility in our parks, particularly Frog Island Park. And whereas Frog Island presents a nexus between the Border to Border Trail, part of the Iron Bell Trail, and the Huron River Water Trail. And whereas the parking and stormwater drainage facilities serving Frog Island need to be upgraded to meet current accessibility standards and protect the water quality of the Huron River. And whereas the City of Ypsilanti is hereby making a financial commitment to the project in the amount of $44,400, matching funds in cash. And whereas if the grant is awarded, the applicant commits its local match and donated amounts from the following sources: Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation, $100,000. Huron River Watershed Council, $4,800 cash and $4,800 in kind. Washtenaw County Water Resources, $2,000 in kind, total $104,800 cash and $6,800 in kind. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby authorizes submission of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund application for $300,000, and further resolves to make it available a local match through financial commitment and donations of $156,000, 34% of the total $456,000 project cost during the 2022-2023 fiscal year.
I'll move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Ms. Wessler.
Evening, Council.
Good evening.
This is just an updated resolution that you saw before you in March. The Natural Resources Trust Fund requires some very specific language in their resolutions, as you may recall from last year. And they requested specifically that we update all of the information regarding the match. So this does not need to be set in stone. So you'll see in the RFL that leaves the city committing to up to $44,000 on this particular project. But as we are continuing to search for additional funds, that number may change over time. Other than that, it is no other changes to the application, no changes in scope, still redoing the parking lot and improving accessibility in that north end of Frog Island Park.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Wessler? Mr. Wilcoxon.
Bonnie, how far does that parking lot go down with the improvements? I mean, there's that whole lot on Rice Street is in need, but how far will this improvement go down?
Not quite halfway. So it goes to about the old concrete pad where the recycling center was.
Got it. Okay.
And that has the opportunity to either expand or contract as the budget allows.
Okay.
Material costs are very elastic right now.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Somerville,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously. Council, on to the next resolution, resolution number 2021-097. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas access to the ballot box is a right of all qualified electors, and whereas prior to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, African Americans in the South faced tremendous obstacles to voting, including poll taxes, literacy tests, and other bureaucratic restrictions denying them the right to vote. And whereas African Americans face harassment, intimidation, economic reprisals, and physical violence when trying to register to vote. And whereas on March 7th, 1965, John Lewis, along with Hosea Williams, led a march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, to bring attention to this injustice. While crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the voting rights activists were attacked by state troopers and John Lewis was severely beaten. And whereas the attack received national attention and persuaded President Johnson and Congress to initiate meaningful and effective national voting rights legislation. And whereas in 2013, the Supreme Court decision of Shelby County versus Holder eliminated a critical part of the act, stating it no longer related to current conditions in areas where discrimination was once rampant. John Lewis responded that the Supreme Court's decision was stuck a dagger into the heart of the Voting Rights Act. And whereas HR 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, later renamed the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020, passed the House of Representatives on December 6, 2019 by a decisive margin, however, never passed the Senate. And whereas the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Action Day raises awareness to ensure voting rights are to be protected from the action of those who seek to uphold voter suppression. And whereas the strength, the sacrifice, and the shedding of blood to implement the 1965 Voting Rights Act should not further erode or be decimated. And whereas people are standing together across America on May 8, 2021 to fight for democracy and push back against deceptive practices which seek to suppress our vote and push back against practices that specifically target African Americans and people of color. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti supports the National John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Action Day and commit to the continued support of voting rights for all people. Be it further resolved that City Council of the City of Ypsilanti direct the City Clerk to forward this resolution to the city's representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, imploring them to pass both H.R. 1 for the People Act and H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
I'll move.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Questions, discussion? Mr. Wilcoxon.
This is an interesting tribute to John Lewis in light of the fact that the Michigan legislature is now looking at 39 bills that would seek to complicate the way our state citizens go about voting. Anything we can do to thwart their efforts and support this is good by me.
Me too. Any other questions or discussion?
Well, my only note is that 3 paragraphs from the end where it distinguishes African Americans and people of color. So some people know the difference, and if the House doesn't, it's sad. But I
Very
support.
true. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All right, seeing and hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Mr. Jones Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Somerville.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you.
Council, the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the capital improvements plan.
Okay, who is going to lead that for us? Ms. Wessler, are you leading us with that? Thank you.
Yes, yep. So we have before us the capital improvements plan for discussion. You heard a little bit about some of those capital improvements tonight earlier on from Mr. Basabica and also from last council meeting earlier on this month. I've broken out the projects by this coming year, I should say, 21-22 and 22-23, and then broken them down further into mandatory, risk avoidance, and strategic projects. There have been no changes in what's before you here from what was presented 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago. Time has not a lot of meaning at this particular moment in time. It's also further broken down by funding source. Do you have any questions about anything in particular?
Ms. Westler, because, well, the capital project request forms, because they've been requested, doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna be sought through, correct?
Right, submitting a project request is not a guarantee of inclusion into the capital improvements plan, but we do include all of those requests for council to make the ultimate decision. It does go through staff first, so it goes through the budget committee, and we sometimes wiggle things around or double check some numbers. But what is before you tonight is, of course, a request.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Wilcoxon?
I was looking at the memo, actually, not the, the memo. It is talking about the dam being the biggest risk at this point because there's $500,000 that's committed to that, and there's no grant secured for that. Just wanted to be clear that there is a grant secured for the initial studies, and that $500,000 is also committed to that part of the project, right? So the $500,000 was committed to the entire project. There isn't a grant specifically for the deconstruction at this point because we haven't gotten that far in the process. So I just wanted to make that comment. So
Thank you.
There's in some place in there that it says that there's it refers to this as a bridge removal. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that's in the memo too. But
I had bridges on the mind when I wrote this. I'm sorry.
that's all right. Why are carts and pedestrian bridge listed as negative in the O&M?
Because the pedestrian bridge would be an additional item for us to upkeep. So it would be additional snow removal and ongoing lighting costs.
Got it. So once the capital is there, then anything with an ongoing operating cost would be a negative.
It's true. Yep.
Got
So
it.
same thing with the carts.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
So third question, why isn't the 94 crossing considered an added value? I mean, it seems like that would bring traffic into the city and out of the city, but I mean, it seems like that's a net plus.
It's considered as a safety improvement, and no economic studies have been done on it. So it is determined to be, I mean, it's sort of a loose classification in the first place, but there have been no specific economic studies done on the pedestrian bridge, but it does further the goals of the city.
So we're not
to safety and pedestrian mobility.
We're not expecting an influx of people from Nipsey Township to come into the cannabis station.
Well, that's entirely possible.
Okay.
I wouldn't rule it out.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Is that it, Mr. Wilcoxon? All right. Okay, seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor, this was just a discussion. This will be up for approval with a public hearing during May 18th.
Okay, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is board and commissions nominations. There were 2 nominations. Both to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Tom Roach, who is being reappointed as an alternate, and then Jason Ringholz, who is being reappointed as a full member. And those will be on the May 18th agenda.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. The next item on the agenda is Board and Commissions liaison reports. So this would just be specific to any council liaison to city boards and commissions.
Any reports? Okay, seeing none, let's, oh, Mr. Brian Jones-Chance, your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just say that the planning commission supported approving the capital improvement plan as it was.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see YPAC on there. I know that's a commission, correct?
It is a commission, yes. Do you have a report for YPAC?
I do. They just, YPAC voted, they passed 6-1 in support of social worker being hired at the YPD. And they're waiting the details of the funding and the job description. And YPAC also requested to be involved with the development of that social worker. And also, they passed a resolution to have a link for YPAC on the city website to be able to cross advertise and know what's going on. And the next meeting for YPAC is May 27th.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Wilcoxon.
I'll be doing, I haven't had any of the meetings, so I'm on the Parks and Rec and the Sustainability Commission. Sustainability Commission will be next week. So I'll have a report on that. For the Parks Commission, last week or a couple of weeks ago when I attended that, they had a number of things going on, but what's going to happen next time is I've been talking with them about a vision for Penn Park once the dam is removed and the powerhouse is still there, to come up with a vision for that park, because it'll be bigger than it is now, and some idea of what to do with the powerhouse, and possible strategies for fundraising to renovate that, since the grants that are involved in the dam removal won't specifically address renovations of that building or possible uses for that. So I'm engaging them in that conversation and to have visioning sessions to come up with that. And as the public engagement process goes forward, we'll get input into that. But the next meeting I'll be presenting to them, there seemed to be some miscommunication as to what their involvement would be in that visioning. So I'll be presenting to them in terms of what the expected increase in land would be for that park. And I just want to let you guys know about that. So.
All right, thank you. Okay, seeing or hearing, not hearing from anyone else. Mr. Holinga, I think that brings us to liaison.
Correct. Liaison reports, starting with SEMCOG.
No report.
Moving on to Watts.
Yeah, we did have a meeting last month, and haven't had one this month yet, so nothing to report.
Urban County.
Urban County meets tomorrow.
DDA.
Mr. Jacobs.
Is he here?
He is.
I am here. Sorry. Just separating my dogs real quick. There's a little skirmish in the middle of the meeting. Part of working from home. So DDA has not had a meeting in a few weeks. We will in a couple. Nothing really new to report. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Friends of Rutherford Pool.
We're having a meeting tomorrow. This past week, there was a request from the friends to have the permit fees waived for the installation of the solar panels on the roof. And that has been done. Thank you, City Manager McMullen. And so that has been taken care of. It's a city building, and all the fundraising has been through the Friends, and the installation is going to be coordinated by Dave Strensky. So it's all volunteer work. So that's a great help to have those fees waived. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, next item on the agenda is council proposed business.
Okay. Council Member Somerville.
I have no council proposed business tonight.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
None on this evening, thank you.
Council Member Morgan.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a note that to go hand in hand with Council Member Mr. Jones Chance, myself and Mayor Pro Tem are going to meet next Saturday for a violence working group, and which is kind of go hand in hand with some of the police reports about some of the just needless and terrifying violence in the city. And so just goal is to find some strategy, anything that could help offset some of this terror that some of our city is going under, just to find some solutions. But and the rest of my proposed business is going to be in conjunction with that when that takes place. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I do thank you, that subcommittee, for working on that. Just looking at the reports that we received this week. Okay. Council Member Simmons.
Nope, nothing to report. No, I'm good. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Council Member Wilcoxon.
Thank you, Mayor. To go along with the working group, I talked with Brian Foley recently about the homicide at the gas station, and was talking about the limitations of city council in terms of setting policy to deal with the gun violence, and dealing with the police department to step up drive-bys by that particular station, which has been a problem for a while, and we discussed strategies in terms of bringing attention to that particular gas station, and so I'll keep having that. I can't join in that other conversation, although I'd like to, because that would put us over a quorum and would have to have an Open Meetings Act. But I will talk to the members of that committee individually. Earlier, I had talked about the boards and commissions nominations and review, and I really think it's important that we make that. I don't like it being part of the consent, because it just kind of passes by without much thought to it, and this has been a huge issue over the years. And last year, this is what precipitated the previous mayor resigning, right? We had talked about having attendance records for these commissioners that are coming up, and having a little bit more review of what was actually happening. And it seems like we've kind of gotten away from that. And I asked Clerk Kalenga to look at that, and he reviewed the records, and there was really no resolution or any motion by council to include that in the deliberations on who we appoint to these commissions. And I think it requires more scrutiny than we've given it. So he's started working on drafting the resolution, and we'll bring that to council in the next meeting. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Councilmember Wilcoxon, however, the boards and commissions nominations are put on one, like we had 2 on tonight. Mm-hmm. And we will vote on them at the next meeting, but tonight was the time that we could have discussed them.
Right, and I recognize that, and
Yeah,
it seems like
so-
that the habit has been that there hasn't been any discussion on those things. They come up and it's kind of a communication. It's like, oh, there they are, and to me that's great because it gives us a heads up, and then we can go have private conversations and things like that. But when we were talking about looking at the attendance records, and having that be, I thought we had already made the motion that should be. That information should be presented for people who are being renominated, and because that was such a contentious issue for certain commissions. I thought that we had already decided that, but that was not there. So I'll look for support to bring that resolution to at least have that be part of it, because I know that was also brought up on a nomination tonight too. So
right, and I do understand what you're saying. I just think that we need to maybe take advantage when they're under communication. We still can have discussion on them.
Right,
so.
I agree. Thank you.
Right, we just haven't. I think we should probably. Yeah. All right, Mr. Jones Chance.
Yeah, the working group for the affordable housing has met a couple times since last meeting, and we had some good conversations with staff, and we looked at some information, and it seems like we have a path forward on bolstering the working group, potentially, pending how it goes. And for the violence working group, this Saturday at 1 o'clock, we are hosting a town hall for city residents to talk about violence issues, and this is going to be more of a listening and learning session for us. And I think that's actually all the announcements that I have.
Okay.
Thanks.
I got a notice that you canceled it for this Saturday.
Last Saturday was rescheduled to this Saturday.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Can I
Yes,
ask a question?
yeah,
So if I attend that
we can all attend it.
as an observer, as a citizen, that's fine, and then it's not going to
We-
violate the Open Meetings Act.
No, it's an open meeting. We can all attend it. I cleared that with both Mr. Halinga and with Mr. Barr. It's an open meeting, so we are all eligible to attend it. So,
Thanks.
okay. And oh gosh, I had it right there. We do really need to begin to do something. It's time to really look at it, at the violence, and discuss it, because there was some, we read the reports from the police chief this week. We've had, over the last week, there were two last week where there were actual injuries, and then there's been shooting in the New Park Ridge. And I hope for the town hall on Saturday that that there's been a special effort to encourage the people that live in New Park Ridge, along with the management there at New Park Ridge, to attend the town hall on Saturday. And I will try to reach out to Mr. Fosler and invite him to join in with us. So that's something that I've really been concerned about, because no one has been killed up there at New Park Ridge yet, but if there's continuous bullets flying around, we certainly don't want anybody to be killed either. So that's it. I don't have anything for tonight. I probably should, but I don't. So City Manager, I think you're up next.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Council, you'll find in your mail, your email box, a public notice from that I sent to you, and it's giving you an update on the project that they're going to be doing. It's the wastewater utilities within West Cross Street between North Huron and Summit Street. These improvements, they're going to take place this coming summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day holiday. So just kind of giving you a heads up on that so that you can let your constituents know that that's coming. The other thing I wanted to report is staff has met also the violence in the city, and we submit to you our report. I believe Andrew had notes from that, and it just kind of details what staff, some of the staff thought about. The committee, the clerk, Joe Myers, our city attorney, our police chief, and Christopher Chips. And so we'll provide you with a summary of the strategies that we discussed. And also our legal counsel, Mr. Barr, is looking at legal strategies that we may be able to adopt to assist us, perhaps ordinances or different things. He's looking into past cases that we had when we had public nuisances and things of that nature that could help us. So I'm excited that all of us are putting our heads together to try to come up with a solution to address the current gun violence and just the violence in the city, period, at large. So I want to thank you, Mayor and Council, again for supporting us during this budget process. And I look forward to receiving any feedback, any amendments you might, questions you may have. I will be happy to address those prior to our next meeting. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you and the staff, and especially Mr. Best, and especially Reagan, our financial director, for all the work that you did on the budget. Thank you. No budgets are not easy, but appreciate it. Mr. Halinga.
Council, the next section on the agenda is just communications. It simply states the second reading of the budget is May 18th, and after that is the adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
I declare the meeting adjourned.
The chief has something to say here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were
I'm waving
waving.
both hands.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was just
you
excited
were
to
saying
adjourn.
bye.
You know, I knew that he was having to leave his business. As hard as it was and as difficult as it is, we're limited in spaces that we have to do training in. So I went and I approached Tom about allowing us to train in his building, and he graciously allowed us. So after his building is emptied out this week, we will have 65,000 square feet to train in. And I want to thank Tom for allowing us to do that. And I have a second one, the executive assistant to the fire department, Simone Dixon. She's been a valued member of my team. She is leaving. She's relocating out of state. Her last day to physically be in the department will be Tuesday the 11th. So if you guys have an opportunity to see Simone, speak to Simone, and please take advantage of that.
Okay, I thought maybe she was moving. Thought maybe she had finished law school, was why she was moving
Still in
on.
law school, she's relocating outside of the state of Michigan.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you
for those notes, Chief.
Thank you.
What are the details on the town hall meeting on Saturday?
Mr. Jones Chance, could you answer that, please?
It's just a public Zoom listening session.
Yeah, will the details be posted so you can find it?
They've gone out by email. I certainly could post them.
Okay, thank you. Could someone send one of
Yeah.
those to me, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will, I will get a thank you to Mr. Harrison for allowing the use of their building, even though they're moving out. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else before? I got my little gavel here. All right. Was your hand up, Reagan? No, you're saying bye. Okay. All right. The meeting is adjourned. Everyone stay safe, stay well, and
Good night.
Have a good night.
Everyone.
Take care.
good night.